In this second film of the series, we will look at buildings and industry. These sectors can halve their emissions by 2030 through change of practices. How we produce goods and how we build buildings will be crucial. With a growing middle class and soon 60% of population living in urban areas, there will be an even bigger demand for goods and buildings. It is decisive that the things we produce do not destroy the climate and ruin essential ecosystems. There are ways to produce goods and buildings in a more sustainable, material-effective and energy-saving way. Construction projects, for example, often use 30 to 50% more steel and cement than necessary. Steel and cement are the highest carbon-emitting materials of all. Much less material could in fact be used, and thereby the negative impact for the climate would be reduced, as well as money saved. Another solution for the building sector to reduce both carbon emissions and costs is to reuse already existing material and reuse old building structures. Further, retrofitting of buildings could have a huge impact to save energy. New windows and smart lighting, for example, could lead to a 40 to 50% cut of energy use for a building. Also, planning and designing for low-carbon technologies such as heat pumps, solar cells, and renewable energy systems for building districts is important when new buildings are built and existing buildings are reconstructed. The building sector has the potential to halve their carbon emissions by 2030. If resource efficiency and low-carbon solutions are implemented in the whole building process, from planning to architecture, design and construction, people's needs and desires for homes and other buildings can be fulfilled in a much more climate-friendly way.
If we continue the business as usual, wasteful economy, we will rapidly consume all the remaining carbon budgets to stay below 2 degrees Celsius just by using cement, steel, and plastics. We have to do things in completely new ways. We have to act fast.
If we want to continue to produce goods, the industry sector must reform. We have to do things differently.
So the industry sector, produces around a third of carbon dioxide emissions. So it's absolutely huge. And a few years ago, the feeling was it would take a long time to reduce emissions. Was it even possible to halve emissions by 2030 of industry? But we're now seeing that it really is genuinely possible to do that. For example, it's by electrifying everything. We could remove 2/3 of the emissions from industry by electrifying everything. So just moving to renewable, to solar, to wind, to nuclear, to hydropower, that could actually reduce emissions by 2/3 in the industry sector. The biggest innovation in industry this century will be the move to a circular economy. And we're seeing rapid innovations in this area. This is one of the most innovative sectors of the global economy, and it will be the mainstream of the global economy within a few decades. That's the only way humanity is going to survive this century, is if we move to a circular economy.
The solutions required do exist. It's about moving to recirculated materials, renewable energy, productions, efficiencies. But it's also about sharing things and giving things an extended life. Just think about cars, they're used less than 5%. Buildings is used less than 20%. A lot of clothes are used just once and then thrown away. We need to remove waste, and we need to give back the value of things. And we can't fix things afterwards. It's about designing in circularity from day one. every company should do that, producing things. Today, we are at less than 10% circularity. And that is because we have a linear, wasteful economy. Our goal should be to shift to 100% circularity, just like nature. And to do that, we need the right laws, we need the right policies, we need the right economical incentives from governments.
We have possibilities to halve the greenhouse gas emissions coming from buildings and industry by 2030. Look how much of the world's total emissions could be reduced through improvement from these sectors. But this can only happen if the politicians now implement the required policies.
Welcome to the Exponential Climate Action Summit 4. This is the second of 11 broadcasts here from the Nordic Pavilion, done by We Don't Have Time. And today we will focus on industries and buildings. My name is Katarina Rolfsdotter-Jansson and I'm hosting this event together with Nick Nuttall, my colleague, who was the Director of Communications at the COP in Paris. And with us today, and also the other broadcasts, we have Anita Soine from Kenya, who will join me here on stage. And Anita, just step up for me, please, here. And Anita, you are our reporter outside of the diplomatic zone, because we are in the diplomatic zone here at the COP. So Anita, what have you picked up so far? This is your second day at the COP.
They have learned a lot, but the normal thing that leaders have been discussing policies in different rooms. And we've had these policies being discussed. I've had quite a number of activists asking the leaders if they are going to discuss policies again, because they're already talking about COP27 before implementing the policies that have been discussed in the previous COP.
Well, thank you very much, Anita, and you will be joining us again tomorrow. And just go out there and pick up the interesting stuff that we cannot reach here because we're too busy here in the diplomatic zone. So thank you very much, Anita. So Nick, we also have with us people from different hubs. We have hubs in Washington, in Nairobi, and also in Stockholm. But before I'd like you to talk about the counter here, Nick.
Have been spent by governments since the COP started. And of course it's absolutely critical that we change this around, because this is wasted money. This is not going in the transition to a climate-friendly future by any means.
And let's watch a video that really focuses on this need to get down on the fossil fuels.
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Okay. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
This is indeed a very powerful video created by UNDP, and we don't have time. We have taken our role to help share it and spread it, and you can do that too. And there is a hashtag called Don't Choose Extinction that you can use when you spread the word about this campaign. And Shweta Chakraborty is our US representative at We Don't Have Time in Washington and United States in general.
An overhaul of how we look at carbon emissions going forward in the United States to really point out that if this can be done here at home, there's no reason that we can't export some of this overhaul of clean energy across infrastructure, across different sectors, across especially these hard to abate sectors, and figure out how to apply some of these learnings in countries all over the world. This is America really attempting to lead and to set forward a standard that can be replicated and applied. So that is the buzz out of Washington, D.C. today. We're really looking forward to hosting scientist Jen Jenkins a little bit later today from our Washington, D.C. hub. She will be contributing to a panel. So please, everybody tuning in, stick around to watch that. Jen Jenkins is the Chief Sustainability Officer at NCX, and there's more surprises coming from the Washington hub as well. So looking forward to kicking off today's broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jutta from Washington, D.C. It is now my profound pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Martina Otto, Head of Cities and Lifestyles at the United Nations Environment Programme. Martina has over 25 years of experience in environmental policy, and she has a particular focus on energy, buildings, transport, and cities, which is what we're talking about today, of course. In her 20 years with the United Nations Development Programme, Environment Programme, she has served in many different functions out of Paris and also out of Nairobi. She's now heading UNEP's work on cities and buildings, heading the UNEP hosts the Secretariat of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Constructions. So you have the floor now, Martina Otto. Great to have you on board.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with you, although remotely, but that helps obviously saving some carbon as well. And well, as you call your session very rightly so, that we're running out of time, there is this urgency to act. And in the little movie that we've seen, we talked about, well, the buildings and construction sector can do it. We can halve annual greenhouse gas emissions over the next up to 2030. But what we actually need to do is we need to get it done a bit faster. And I do have some feedback, which is a little disturbing. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe that's a hint at the sound team, sorry. And obviously buildings and construction is a real heavy weight in this equation. The sector is responsible for almost 40% of global CO2 emissions, and with building and construction materials representing about 10% of the global carbon emissions. And we've been calling it for some time the giant, a sleeping giant. And why are we saying that? Because we've been looking ever since the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction was created at COP21, we've been looking at what is happening in the sector. So we keep track with an annual report, and obviously that gives us the numbers to compare a little bit. And we have put together a tracker, and that tracker gave us numbers that progress had even slowed between 2016 and 2019 in the sector. And that we absolutely needed to increase actions and their impact fivefold to do the decarbonization job. And this year's Global Status Report did give us a different number. That's 10% decline of emissions in 2020 as compared to the previous year. And that could be called good news, and meaning that we're seemingly on track to achieve the complete decarbonization by 2050 that we need to get to. But if we look behind the curtain, we do see that this is only temporary. It reflects the disruptive changes in building use and the impacts on the construction sector during the pandemic. And it's pretty much a momentary improvement that disguises the lack of structural change that we're seeing. And the emissions are expected to rebound as economic activities do pick up again. And not only that, but also because every week the equivalent of a city of the size of Paris is being built around the world. So half of the buildings standing in 2060 are not yet built. And obviously that means the other half is yet built and needs deeper refurbishment. But back to that part that is not yet built, that means more floor space means also more use of energy in operations. And the energy efficiency improvements that we have been seeing, they're there, no denying, but they have been outpaced by the additional floor space. And that means that the incremental improvements that we're seeing are not good enough. We need transformational change. Another point that I wanted to make, and in the little movie it was alluded to as well, the materials use. That is expected to more than double by 2060. And with a third of global materials used in the buildings and construction sector. And that comes obviously with a footprint, not only on the natural resources, but also for climate, as those materials do come with their very own carbon footprint linked to their manufacturing. And I think in the movie it was said as well, 30% of steel and 50% of cement do go into buildings globally. And this is what we call the hard to abate sectors. And I understand that later you will also have a panel with steel companies talking about their efforts to actually tackle that issue. But what does that mean? It really comes down to how much we build, how we build. We heard already a little bit that design is really important, and with what we build, so the building materials, and their innovation is critical as well. It's not only about mitigation, adaptation is also really important in the sector, and I really want to make sure that we're not forgetting that. And that means we need to look at the typical lifetimes of a building constructed. A building constructed today is likely to be still in use in 2070, 2050 as well. But the climate that it encounters will have changed significantly. And I think we've all gotten a good idea of what is ahead, with a lot of dramatic heat episodes in the very recent past, the floods that we have seen simply washing away what is supposed to provide shelter for us. And the outlook obviously is not rosy. At this point, we see that there is a huge must not let go by opportunity to build the buildings we need and that we deserve. And we've come up with a joint up vision, and that was done very much in tune with the high-level champions, the Race to Zero, the Race to Resilience, with the co-leadership as well of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction as far as the Race to Zero in the built environment was concerned. And it's a vision of sector transformation and radical collaboration across all the sector's actors. And it really says by 2030, we need to halve emissions, whereby 100% of new buildings must be net zero in operation, with widespread energy efficiency retrofits of existing assets well underway, and that we need to start tackling the embodied carbon as well. And then we move gradually to 2050 with a full net zero across the whole life cycle of all buildings. Now, how do we get there? Policy and finance will be critical in this, and the building codes that are really the most effective regulatory measure to drive deeper change is not quite at the level that we need to see as well. And here again, it's a story of a mixed picture. We have some improvements. If we look at between 2015 and 2020, 19 additional countries have put building energy codes into place. And that brings the number of those countries that do have them to 80. But most of the new construction will actually take place in countries without mandatory building energy codes. And obviously that's a field for further improvement. At this COP, new ratcheted up NDCs were due, the nationally determined contributions. And there's a piece of good news. Building energy efficiency is now the second most often mentioned topic in the NDCs. 136 countries do mention buildings in their NDCs, and that's up from 88 in 2015. That's an increase of about 55%. But most countries do lack full sector life cycle decarbonization targets or very concrete time-bound measures. How do we get there? And obviously that's another area that we hope is going to be addressed as we go forward. On the finance side, we do see investments in energy efficiency increasing as well. And for example, in 2020, we have seen an increase by 11%, so reaching more than $100 billion US. At the same time, most of this is coming from a very small number of countries, mostly Europe. And at the very same time as well, we do look at a real discrepancy here, because for every $1 US spent in energy efficiency improvements in buildings, we do see 37 spent in conventional buildings. And that's an imbalance that we have to correct as well. Now, having said that, some of the biggest, most cost-effective climate mitigation and resilience solutions are available today and in this sector. And that means, for example, a surge in clean energy investment will ultimately bring savings across the global economy and cut in half the proportion of households' income spent on energy. And that obviously is a good message for all those who are grappling to make ends meet. And on top, we do see a higher return of jobs created for each million invested in energy efficiency than in many of the other sectors. And that makes the building sector a really, really critical one for the recovery packages. And it's already being picked up if you look at economic recovery from the pandemic. But we need to make sure that it's not only spent on buildings, but it's spent on the right buildings, so that we really truly future-proof our investments. And what does this give us? We do have a common vision. We have the technology and the solutions. We know what to do. And the time is now to put into place all the scaffolding to realize this vision and to bring the solutions to scale. And at the Global ABC, together with the IEA, we have put together a global and 3 regional roadmaps for Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And they really present a framework and a process to help countries to develop their own national roadmaps, to set those interim targets and the milestones, and to spur also the cooperation nationally across all the parts of the buildings value chain. And thereby create this culture of positive feedback loops between the private sector and the public sector, so that we stop pushing the can into the other party's sort of corner, but that we really truly work together and show commitment on the one side, help set the frameworks in place on the other, and thereby move it up, ratchet it up as we go. And to close, I really want to re-emphasize this need for a triple strategy. And I heard in the movie as well, all electric, all electric, fine. But we need to really look at how this electricity is being produced. So that's super important. But we need to really make sure that we use as little of all this electricity as well as possible. And that comes back to the design issues. How can we use nature-based solutions to drive down the energy demand in the first place? How do we build buildings that are, well, passive or actually even energy positive in the end? And we need to make sure that we address the buildings materials. And there's so many good opportunities out there to actually look at innovation for circularity as well, to bring in what would be considered a waste in a different sector and bring that into this one as a new building material. And it means as well that we need to stop looking at the single building or single aspects of the building, for example, the appliances that go into it, but that we take a real integrated approach. And that means to make buildings part of the city, of creating more sustainable neighborhoods, and really to spur a city or a nationwide energy transition, looking at buildings not in isolation, but in correlation also with the energy sector and the transport sector. And I think what came across is hopefully not only a negative picture, but also that there are signals that this sleeping giant is waking up. And we now need to make sure that the sector is making those giant steps that it absolutely can make towards sector transformation. That would be sort of my remarks for right now. And I'm happy to come back with anything if there are any questions, if that's of interest. Thank you.
For painting the picture of this extremely important sector that we really work to in order to get down to zero in time. If you can stay on and take questions, that would be lovely. I'm going to connect now to our hub in Kenya, where we have Dr. Ngungu Josephine with us, and see if they have any questions from Kenya or any remarks.
So it seems like my audience is still processing the presentation. So, but I'm asked if they would have any question. Anybody in the team will be having a question? Okay, so we don't have a question at the moment, but we've asked people to write them down, both on the app. We do not have time app, or they can ask on Twitter, or they can write them out, and then I'll be able to ask them as we proceed. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robert Ngungu Josephine. And the hub is at Mount Kenya University in Kenya, and they will be back again during the broadcast. So now it's my pleasure to introduce up here on stage very shortly, but first we're going to watch another video from UNDP. It's a message to our world leaders that we will be connecting for you now, and let's see if we can get that to roll.
Peacefully sleep in your bed. Time runs so fast you can only save yourself by reaching higher grounds. My name is Andrea, and I'm one of the thousands of victims of past year's hurricanes Eta and Iota in Honduras. To this day, almost 1 year after those tragic floods in which nearly 100 fellows Hondurans died, we are still terrified every time it rains. As the damaged infrastructure is yet to be rebuilt, it will only take 3 days of continuous rain to put us underwater again. Climate is not changing. Climate has already changed, and it is now your responsibility to save us. In the meantime, I am hoping I will still be here by the time you take meaningful actions.
Strong message, huh? Let's see what messages we have and interactions on the We Don't Have Time app. And it's my pleasure to introduce here on the stage the founder of We Don't Have Time, Ingmar Rentzhog.
Thank you, Katarina.
Great to see you.
Nice to be here, even though we have been here for 24 hours.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. What's happening in the app? First, I will explain a little bit how the app works. We're a review platform where you can give climate warnings to things you don't like, companies or leaders that are doing the wrong thing. You can give them a warning, and we will have them to answer, and we will share that to a really, really large audience. We have a social media reach with over 50 million each month. So if you're angry at something, write a climate review and give a climate warning. But more fun is actually to give climate love. If you see someone doing something that is good for the climate, you can highlight that and give climate love. And actually, I believe that love is much better way to change the world, because people want to be loved. So we should not forget to share love. And what's happening here today in the app and on the climate meeting is that we had a lot of pledges. It's kind of the theme of the day is the pledges. We had 100 countries pledging for end deforestation. That's great. Even Brazil is joining that. And we also have 90 countries pledging on limiting methane gases. That is also a very, very bad thing for climate, greenhouse gas. So that is really, really great climate love. But I have a warning, and that is we have another pledge from Jeff Bezos. It's actually something good. But if you think of it, Jeff Bezos is giving $2 billion to the climate. Sounds really much, right? But if you look at this count up, $2 billion is what the world governments are giving in subsidies for this broadcast. So the pledge from Jeff Bezos will only cover half of this broadcast. I think it's great that leaders like Jeff Bezos is putting money behind the climate, but what if he will put that money to sponsoring the climate dinosaur video from UN and advocate to end those subsidies? That is what we need to do.
Thank you very much, Ingmar Rentzhog. Let's see if we can connect back to David Olsson in Stockholm and see if they have any remarks or questions to Martina Otto or comments.
Hello everyone. Yes, I was just interested in the concept of transformation, because we all understand that we really need transformational and not incremental change. And I interpret this as radical change, basically. And very tough changes, they hurt. I mean, companies are invested in the old solutions. So what drives this transformation in terms of facilitating it, basically? Is it compensation? Is it big government spending, market mechanisms? I guess it's a mix, but what kind of mix and what will be most effective here?
See if we can connect Martina Otto back to answer this.
Well, one point, the first point is really about this radical collaboration, where we look at co-creation of the frameworks, of the rules of the game, of looking together to make this a push and pull that works. And as you rightly say, well, in some cases, it will be tough, and it will require some bridging to help, come up with new ways of doing business, and in others it will open up a whole new world of innovation and new opportunities as well. And it is, how do we bridge this gap from one to the other? And there obviously some government spending is definitely part of what needs to be done, but it's also very much about the right financing mechanisms. How do we bridge between what we know as the wrong pocket problem in the sector, that those who have to invest in the first place may not be the ones that then save during the time of operation, for example. How do you bridge that? So financing mechanisms from one to the other. But I'd really want to emphasize that a lot of these technologies are out there. Some of them are not that radical, but they're not radically used in a sense. How can we bring in some of the innovation that, for example, some of the architects are dreaming up at the moment by bringing nature-based solutions to the buildings, and thereby connecting a few dots as well in terms of reducing, for example, the energy demand for cooling, but also looking at how we address flood management in a city. And again, it's the wrong pocket problem. If we save on the other side by making less investments, maybe in an energy infrastructure, or by saving with regard to investments into rainwater management, how do you bridge that? How do you bring it back so that on the other side cost is being equaled out? So that definitely is a key point. But in some cases, it's really as well about setting up new value chains. I mentioned those new building materials, for example. How do you connect that? How do you make sure that there's some companies out there, and they have been switching as well a little bit their business model. And will be a way to take that. Sorry, is that too long?
Well, thank you.
I heard some comments.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Martina Otto, for your participation here at the broadcast. That was invaluable. And also thank you very much, David Olsson, for the questions from the hub in Stockholm. We will now turn to a video that explains a little bit more about the We Don't Have Time app.
Do you want to act on the climate crisis but don't know how? With our app, you can send climate reviews to organizations and leaders. Our team reaches out to the organization to encourage dialogue. Just download We Don't Have Time. Tap the green Create button and choose Type of Review. Give climate love to people doing great stuff. Create a climate idea to suggest a solution. Or send a climate warning to those who hurt the planet. To increase your impact, you can share the review, because when enough people agree with you, organizations and leaders will change. Many even want your opinion, because we have to work together. Do you want to be part of the solution?
Reaching the goals from the Paris Agreement requires transformation from all sectors of society. We will now head into a panel talk with experts in this field of transformation, and businesses, of course, have no other way than to transform, otherwise they will be left behind. So let's start with a little bit of a vignette about the transformations. And with us we have some experts that I'm very happy to introduce. And we have with us Pascal Eveillard. He's Director of Sustainable Business Development at Saint-Gobain. And Pascal is an executive manager with profound experience and expertise in sustainability, in particular in the building sector. And he joined Saint-Gobain, the Saint-Gobain Group in the year of 2000, and he contributes to developing and implementing Saint-Gobain's strategy in fostering the market transitions towards a more sustainable future. And he supports the group's BUs to develop sustainability roadmaps and more sustainable cities that we, of course, have to focus very much on to come to further on to push on. So, hello, Pascal. Happy to see you here on board with us for this panel. And I'd also like to introduce Sandra Frank. She's co-founder and executive vice president at Arvet. Arvet is Swedish, and it would translate to the inheritance, but the name of the company is Arvet. And Sandra is leading Arvet's movement to create a massive change in the global building industry. And Arvet directed the first, we actually saw that in the trailer of the video before, the world's first 8-story apartment wooden building. And this building has since gathered enormous interest from all over the world. And she's also been part of the Swedish delegations in promoting sustainable forestry and wooden housing construction throughout the world. So let's see if we can get an image of Sandra up here on the screen. Mats Pellbäck-Scharp, please join me on stage. And here we have Sandra. Welcome, Sandra. I'm happy to see you. Happy that you can join this panel. And Mats Pellbäck-Scharp, you are from Ericsson, and you're head of sustainability at Ericsson. And your responsibility is climate action, circular economy, energy performance, and triple bottom line impact of products, services, and also company operations.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you with us, Mats.
Thank you.
And from the Stockholm hub, we are now connecting again because we have one of the panelists with us in Stockholm. And that is Claes Kollberg. He is CTO and founder of CemVision. And that's a cement plant manager in Europe and Africa. And he has a world-unique experience when it comes to cement, specifically climate cement, and also fossil-free steel production and electrification. So let's see if we can get Claes here up on the screen with us. Excellent. Yes. Can you hear us, Claes?
I can hear you very well, yes.
Excellent. So cement is, of course, a huge challenge, and I could even say a problem when it comes to construction. And how are you tackling this problem in your company, CemVision?
Yeah, it's good to know the background that the world is made of limestone. During more than 400 million years, the species have created something called limestone. And today we are building our cities with limestone, and that is becoming the raw material for Portland cement. But CemVision, there are a number of alternative sorts of cement that is not Portland cement, and the Romans, they built their cities during 500 years, and that was forgotten. And now we have had it some centuries, 150 years of Portland cement, but they are developing new type of cement. And CemVision, we have focused on one cement called BCSA cement. And with that, we can produce similar to Portland cement without CO2 emissions.
And please elaborate a little bit more. What does this cement consist of?
Yeah, basically you need calcium, silica, alumina, and iron to produce ordinary Portland cement. And the reason why these materials is because the earth crust contains more than 90% of these elements containing with oxygen. So basically we have to look on the ground. What do we have to build these cities? In the coming decades, we have to build cities for 3 billion people due to urbanization and population growth. So basically, biomass is a fantastic material to produce the molecules at the right spot to make, proteins, etc., and some building materials. But to do this on a big scale, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, there will be 2.6 billion people living there 2050, and 2100 it will be 4 billion people. So in order to find a sustainable cement or building material for them, we have to look beyond Portland cement. But basically there is no biomass to do this in these cities. So this type of cement is potential to use there. But there are other type of cements like calcined clay, etc. So, but for our product, it is based mainly of circular material from other type of industries, like steel industry. And then since there is no virgin limestone in it, it takes much less energy to produce it. And then we go for electrification, like steel industry, but they're using hydrogen, but we do it thermal energy with like plasma burners, etc.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn now to Sandra. Arvet works consistently in wood, and as I explained, was stated earlier, you have erected an 8-story building that has gained a lot of attention. And you're also working in Africa, where you have erected a village community hall, and you're also working with prefab houses for refugees. So could you please tell us a little bit more about the diversity of how you work in wood, with wood?
Yeah.
In wood.
Yes, thank you. We made a very important decision in about 2009 because we are developers and also used to be contractors, but we actually thought that it's so easy to build the wooden houses, and the most important thing right now is to spread the knowledge. So we're only developing houses and buildings out of wood, and to put the light on why we need to grow our building materials and stop using all our fossil materials that's in the ground and leave them in the ground. We also need to start replanting big scale. But so we had a collaboration. We've done so many different exhibitions to put attention on timber as a building material, as a modern new building materials for even higher buildings. And we've been to the Venice Architectural Biennale 3 times, and to raise the topic there for all the global architects. But also after that, we figured what's the next step, and it must be UN Habitat that are responsible for that everybody has a housing globally. So with UN Habitat, we wanted to put the light on a renewable building material and why we need to use it. But it's a big thing. We all need to take responsibility to start replanting all our forests. And but up in Kollberg, where we inaugurated this community hall, totally in CLT, and it was erected in a couple of weeks up there in the beginning of October. So we want to talk about sustainable building materials and actually building materials that we can grow and that are also giving us oxygen and giving us materials and cleaning, kind of eating up emissions that we already let out while they are growing. And another thing is that we need future carbon sinks for the future. And we can see that the buildings that we've built, they will stand in so for example, in the city of Stockholm for hundreds of years as carbon sinks there.
Sandra, just a quick note, CLT is cross-laminated timber, for those that might not be familiar with this acronym. And I'm turning now to Mats Pellbäck-Scharp. During your leadership, Ericsson has committed and worked with according to the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Please tell us a little bit more about what this entails for this global company.
Well, I think, I mean, as a pioneer in the private sector, we always have to start with ourselves and of course our buildings and using the buildings globally, because we are available or present in 150 countries. And use offices and buildings a lot of different places. So for us to start using and driving our suppliers of buildings in a different way, I think is important also from energy and so on side. So I think that is one of the key elements for us where we can contribute and drive sort of a market in a way and work together with other companies. And I think we need sort of all different types of solutions, and I think, I mean, wood and new materials and of course probably cement as well. So I think we need to understand how to use the different materials, when to use them and for what reason and in what places. I think it's also very important. So from our perspective, it's really to understand. So that's why I'm sort of super interested to be in this panel to learn more about how we can put these requirements in a good way going forward. So thank you.
So what promises that and possibilities does the IT sector hold in its hands when it comes to driving down to zero in this sector of society?
Yeah, there I think we are even more important in a way, and also we talked about buildings are built out of hard to abate sectors, and to change these structures and also to change them in a safe way for people to sort of live in and work in these buildings. I think it's hugely important to sort of take this in the time that it takes. But I think already now we have the opportunity to use ICT technology to improve the buildings and reduce the waste of energy that is sort of run in the buildings. Only by connecting the ventilation and the heating systems and before starting even to retrofit, we can save 15 to 20% of the energy used in a lot of buildings around the world. So we are wasting a lot of energy. So using smart building solutions and doing that very, very fast, I think is one way to sort of take the low-hanging fruits, to buy us some time for these new materials to develop and the market to develop over time. So I think that is really where we see the focus on the hard to abate being extremely important long term, but in the short term, why not start reducing emissions now?
And Mats, when you listened to Martina Otto's keynote previously, that she stated that the NDCs, when it comes to energy savings in buildings, are really sharpened towards this what we see, it's at least so far at the COP. What are your reflections?
I think that's hugely important, but I still think that we miss the opportunity to reduce even faster by controlling what we already have better. She talked a lot about the retrofitting. I think that's very important of the current situation, and choosing new materials is also very important. But I think we could act faster on the digitalization part and to control the things that we already have, and that is, I mean, cheaper and faster. So I think that is will buy us some time for the other parts.
And we need to buy time for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mats. Let's turn to Pascal from Saint-Gobain. How is Saint-Gobain working with reducing carbon emissions in all of your scopes, really?
Well, Saint-Gobain is acting at different levels when it comes to carbon, and more specifically in the building sector. First, we are very committed to reduce our own carbon footprint on all our scopes, so scope 1, 2, and 3. We have targets for 2030, which have been validated by SBTi. If I give some figures, we have committed to reduce in absolute values our Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 33% by 2030 compared to 2017, and for the Scope 3 by 16%. To do that, we act on many fronts. We go for low carbon energies. We go for more circularity. So I heard a lot speaking of old materials. Those old materials can become more virtuous and more sustainable, typically by replacing virgin raw materials by recycled content or waste. And there we have lots of developments to replace virgin raw materials by waste, what we call waste materials. So we work a lot on the composition of and the design of our products. A second domain where we act is through our solutions. So we are also convinced that energy efficiency is key in the building sector. So through our glazing and insulation solutions, we deliver reduced operational carbon emissions. So we heard from Martina that this is still a big part of the carbon emissions in the building sector. For those solutions, I think that not only it brings carbon emission reductions, but it also brings more comfort and more well-being to the building's occupants. Another way to reduce buildings' carbon emission is by using less carbon-intensive solutions. So next to wood, there are also what we call lightweight solutions, which actually fit well to wood frame constructions. So instead of filling between the beams with massive construction, if concrete or bricks or other kind of masonries, you can replace by what we call lightweight constructions made of gypsum boards, for instance, insulation in between, and light facade components. And this is a way to reduce significantly the carbon emissions, the embodied carbon emissions of buildings. If you compare such a lightweight solution to a massive construction, you can reduce up to 80% the embodied carbon. And the third domain where we act is by joining coalitions of stakeholders to advocate for better regulations in the building sector. So we heard that NDCs are more and more considering regulations and building codes too low for the building sector. But we think that we can do more. Those building codes can be much more ambitious, and that's why we are. So we have been a founding member of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. Martina talked about. We are very much engaged in the World GBC network. We think that, and it was also stated, that if we want to change things in the building sector, we need absolutely to convince all stakeholders, from specifiers to investors, to contractors, material suppliers, to work together to deliver, to bring examples of what is actually feasible, and to convince policymakers that they can set much more ambitious targets for the building sector.
Thank you very much, Pascal. I'm turning now to Sandra and also to Claes. In terms of policies that just was mentioned, what policies would you like to see in place, and what policies are you pushing for? Let's start with Sandra.
Yeah, now we're starting to talk about that in Sweden, but we've been very critical that all legislations and regulations in Sweden and throughout the world is by making an energy sufficient house, an energy sufficient building. But there has been no regulations at all during the building phase. So if you look at a house and it's as a lifespan on 100 years, it takes about 2 years to build it, and then for the rest 98 years is where you're using the energy for the house, which is about 20% for those 98 years. 80% of the energy is consumed during the building phase, and there is still no regulations at all on that. So I really think that Saint-Gobain is on to something there, because it's really important to higher the ambitions in the building sector.
Thank you, Sandra.
The building phase.
Thank you, Sandra. What are your reflections, Claes, when it comes to this?
Is that in the European standardization, it only give permit for Portland cement for construction buildings. So we have to open up these type of standards, but it's very, very problematic in this standard because the people are not really cooperating. So actually it's standing completely still and nothing is happening. So this is really have to move forward in that. The other problem we have, as I see it, is that people are not aware about the cost. To produce CO2-free cement will double the cost basically for cement, but it's only 1% of the building cost. So if you buy a building for 400,000 euro, you only have to pay 400 euro extra for that one. So it's or 4,000 euros. So it's more or less nothing for making construction CO2-free. And this is not, people don't know about this. The same goes for steel. A fossil-free car, for example, will cost 300 euro more. If you pay 30,000 euro, this is peanuts. So this must come out, and then people are ready to pay for this. I'm sure about it.
Thank you very much, Claes. I'm turning now to Mats for some final remarks. From your perspective, what could we hope for at the COP when it comes to industry and buildings? I mean, you have the ICT perspective, but you also have sort of the entire science-based targets perspective, because this is what your approach from Ericsson.
Yeah, I think, I mean, what we could hope for is really we heard yesterday about sort of regulation stopping circular solutions for us, and we heard here that we need to open up the building standards. I think realization about the circular models and the new materials have to come into the regulation and not be stopped by the regulation. And I think that realization needs to go fast. And of course, then I have to talk about the digitalization. I think also if we sort of connect the buildings in a good way, buildings are super good because they are sort of have a big inertia. It's a big mass of concrete or wood or other things that you have in that building. And with the rapid transition to renewable energy, you could use the inertia of the building to turn on and off things on a very short period of time to control power and electricity. So that could be part of a bigger system to increase the amount of renewable energy in the system as well. So I think connecting the buildings is not only good because you can sort of control it in a much better way than you do today. We don't overheat in the winter or overcool in the summer. The other part is that you can use the inertia of the building to balance out the electricity grid, and I think that is another sort of benefit of connecting them. So I think there are several benefits of connecting buildings.
Well, thank you very much, Mats Pellbäck-Scharp, and thank you very much all of the panelists here, Sandra, Claes, and also Pascal joining us from different parts of the world in this panel on buildings. And to be continued, and keep up the wonderful work all of you do in different perspectives, wood, new cement, and also, of course, here from Mats Pellbäck-Scharp's Ericsson's ICT perspective. Thank you. Thank you, Mats. All right. It is now my pleasure to introduce the next panel. We will focus on industry now. And with us here we have, via Zoom, we have Jonas Otterheim, who is head of climate action at Volvo Cars. And let's see if we can get Jonas connected. Excellent. Jonas has the global responsibility for Volvo Cars' climate strategy to become climate neutral across its full value chain in 2040. And while reducing its total emissions as fast as possible already today. A warm welcome to you, Jonas. And from Stockholm, let's see if we could connect with Stockholm. Yes, we can. We have Thomas Hörnfeldt. He's Vice President, Sustainable Business and Public Affairs at SSAB. And Thomas has a vast experience in general management and sales, market intelligence and sustainability, and he's an MBA from Uppsala University and an MSc from KTH in Stockholm. So warm welcome to Thomas Hörnfeldt from ABB.
Thank you so much.
And
SSAB.
here in SSAB, I'm so sorry, SSAB of course. And with me here in Glasgow, I have Luke Herbert. Great to see you here, Luke. International Director of Communications at the Climate Group. And Luke has helped spearhead many of the Climate Group's major campaigns, like the RE100, on boosting renewable energy, to EV100, on making electric vehicles the norm. So, let's start with Jonas. Please tell us in a few sentences about Volvo's pathway toward 2040.
Well, to start off with, I think it is important to recognize that, well, as a car manufacturer, we are still part of the problem, and as an industry, we still are responsible for a very big chunk of the total CO2 emissions. And that is the reason why we say that we need to go full electric and try to shift as fast as possible. So we have said that by 2030, Volvo Cars should be a fully electric car company, and that is without any caveats or any conditions. We will do this globally. And that is the key thing. But what we also say is that electrification is not enough. And I think this is the key topic to discuss in this panel from my perspective, that we also need to reduce emissions across the board, because of course an electric car is important, but the emissions of the material in this car is of course still there. And they might even be higher than an internal combustion engine version. So we're also focusing on reducing emissions from batteries, reducing emissions from steel, aluminum, etc., to ensure that we take the full life cycle perspective and reduce all of them. And that is what we include when we say that we are to be fully climate neutral by 2040.
Thomas, SSAB is one of the major carbon emitters in Sweden, and what impact will do you think your strong focus on decarbonizing your processes, what effect will it have on your own emissions, the Swedish emissions, and also the global emissions?
Well, the easiest question is the Swedish emissions. We are admittedly the largest single CO2 emitter in Sweden. We make up 10% of the Swedish CO2 emissions, and that is something that we want to change. And we're not talking about reducing CO2 emissions, we are talking about eliminating them, which means that the effect in Sweden will be a 10% reduction in CO2 emissions. For ourselves, the same thing applies. We will be launching fossil-free steel products as a commercial product on commercial terms in 2026, and latest 2045 we will be an entirely and probably the world's first fossil-free steel company. When it comes to the world, it is a bit more complicated. We are using electricity indirectly via hydrogen to replace carbon and coke in our processes. That's why we are getting rid of CO2 emissions. And from a global perspective, this is very much dependent on what kind of electricity that you're using. In Sweden, we're virtually eliminating our CO2 emissions because we have a pretty much fossil-free power grid, hydropower, wind, and so on. We have no carbon power plants, basically. In the world, with the electricity mix that we have in the world, this would be a zero-sum game. It would be plus minus zero. If we're talking about Europe, implementing this method across the board with today's energy mix would give a reduction of 40% approximately. If we would do this in China, the CO2 emissions would increase by 20-30% or so, depending on the very dirty electricity that is being used there. So I see a great potential here because that electricity grid needs to be decarbonized anyway. Sooner or later, and we can't wait for somebody else to do their part. We need to start moving here and now and trust that we will have access to fossil-free electricity worldwide.
Much, Thomas. I'm turning now to Luke, and please tell us a bit about your campaign Zero Steel and what this entails.
Yes, so Steel Zero is a program that's run by a whole team at the Climate Group, and communications just part of that, as with the other programs. And it's all about a business-led campaign and program actually that enables businesses to signal that they would like in the future to be buying net zero steel and to be helping establish and set a pathway together with Responsible Steel, our partners, in terms of the emissions reduction which they would like on the route towards getting to net zero steel. And these kind of demand side campaigns actually have already played a huge role in helping to influence markets, and also if businesses choose as well through those programs to help inform and shape and influence policy as well. So what you have at the moment, we have 15 members, some really fantastic leadership from the property sector, from the renewables sector, and also fantastic engagements already with a number of other sectors who are considering membership, including the automotive sector. And they have made this commitment to say, yes, we want in the future to buy net zero steel. And that allows us to pool that demand, show the scale of it, and send that signal to steelmakers and to policymakers that the buyers are there and want it, the demand is there. And through that, there's a number of fantastic sort of positive effects that come through that. It enables greater certainty in terms of investment. Therefore, for businesses or governments who are looking to support innovation, just as what SSAB have talked about, then they've got a greater certainty they're going to be able to sell that steel and the products to their customers. It also helps those businesses to amplify their own choices as well. By working together, they could do that. So, for example, in our RE100 program, that now encompasses businesses which have the collective energy demand, electricity demand greater than the whole of the United Kingdom, actually, or Italy. So you can get this kind of scale, and while still doing your own thing as a business at the same time. And then often, to make these changes, it requires policy changes as well, actions from governments. And so these businesses can say, if you take these actions, then this will help us to buy the steel from your country, to have that steel that we want. This will help, there is a market there for your products if you can help take these actions as well.
So it's a push and a pull.
Yeah, it's a pull first. These are the buyers, and they're leveraging their market power. But then from that, if there's barriers or things which are not enabling that to happen as quickly as possible, it's completely up to the businesses. It's a business-led initiative. We work with them. Then they can work together and send that collective signal as a much bigger voice to those other actors, whether those be steelmakers or governments.
Thomas, your reflections on this initiative, please.
Worried for the demand of fossil-free materials in the future, but all help we can get is appreciated, and I think this has a great signal value. I think it's important that people stand up and say we need to change something. We are a hard-to-abate sector, and we really want to show the world that a hard-to-abate sector can improve, can change, can be world-leading when it comes to eliminating CO2 emissions, and we really appreciate both the push and the pull.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'd like to turn now to Thomas. I'm sorry, to Volvo here, and also ask further on both Luke and Thomas this question about the CBAMs and other carbon leakage mechanisms. What effect will this have if it comes in place? It will probably be a while before this happens, but what effect will this have for you, for instance, at Volvo, Jonas?
We foresee that if there would be a CBAM, and we are supportive of something like that, that would of course change the balance of our current supply chain. And suppliers like SSAB would likely come out better if you are to deliver fossil-free steel than suppliers that are not. But also just looking at the current state and comparing suppliers with a worse energy mix with suppliers with a better one, the CBAM would have an effect. So we are working according to the CBAM, even though it does not exist yet, to prepare for that to happen. So I think that is, of course, an interesting development, and even though it's not yet in place, we would be supportive of something like that to happen. But also building on what we have said, I think the demand side, we are one of the buyers of steel, and we know that unless we can change the car fully and replace all the steel in the car, we are likely to have somewhat around 1 ton steel in the average car. And since this is a hard-to-abate area, we need the solutions similar to what SSAB have today. And that is why we are partnering up with them to see in what applications of the car can we make use of fossil-free steel, to firstly understand how big of a solution is this for us, and secondly, send the signal to them that we are supportive of what we're doing and we're interested in putting this into our cars, that we buy and sell to the customers. But thirdly, also, SSAB is only one of the suppliers, and we are not able yet to single source from one supplier. And due to that reason, we of course need to show the other steel suppliers that we need this solution to happen, and we are willing to partner up and connect with suppliers like SSAB and hope that others would do the same, even though they do not yet show those solutions as well as SSAB do today. And I think that is key. We very much support the sort of transformation that SSAB is in and the solution that seems to be in place by 2026 or so.
Thank you very much, Jonas. And Thomas, for SSAB, in your perspective, and the CBAMs and other possible carbon leakage mechanisms?
Yeah, it is another possible carbon leakage mechanism. I think the important thing here is that we have, or that we do, prevent carbon leakage. The European steel industry is world leading, not only SSAB, when it comes to CO2 efficient steel production already today. Moving steel production outside Europe will increase global CO2 emissions. The carbon leakage protection mechanism that we have today are the so-called free allocations that will reduce the burden of efficient steel makers inside Europe. Now, a lot of people want to remove this. They are sometimes perceived as a free ride, which is technically not correct, but anyway. And if those are removed, then we need another carbon leakage protection mechanism. And in many ways, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is an attractive way of doing this. You would impose the same type of CO2 costs for imported steel as we do for steel produced in the EU. So far so good, and I really don't have a problem with that. What is maybe worth noticing, and I'm a little surprised that Jonas didn't say this, is that this will of course increase the prices of steel in the EU. If we increase the cost for European steel makers by removing the free allocations, and if we increase the cost for imported steel by imposing the CBAM, that will lead to higher steel prices inside Europe. And I sometimes a little concerned that my European customers will lose global competitiveness. Maybe it's worse on heavy vehicles where steel is a larger portion of the cost base. But it's one of those things that you need to think about. And in the ideal world, which rarely exists, you should somehow reverse these charges when you're exporting stuff out of Europe in order to have a global competitiveness. But these are technicalities. I think the important thing with the CBAM is the message that it sends, and that it incentivizes also other parts of the globe to impose similar carbon costs as we have in Europe. I think maybe that is the greatest benefit of the CBAM.
Thank you, Thomas. And Luke, your perspective from your initiative.
Well, I think generally carbon pricing and fair carbon pricing is a good thing, for reducing CO2. But I think Thomas highlighted some of the dimensions with this, that the global steel market is very international, and Europe has a role to play, but so does China. And from our perspective, we need to make sure that whatever mechanisms there allow multiple countries to be included, and that we help to move the whole global market for steel. And so actually European companies demanding greener steel, low emission steel, not just from Europe, but when they think about purchasing decisions from China, from India, from other places, and helping to reward steel makers if they invest in China and India, if they invest in greener technology, is also really critical. So I think anything that helps, as Thomas said, the signal to steelmakers, say if you invest in greener technology, you will not be disadvantaged from that, I think is very positive. But we need to ensure we have an international and global approach to this, and actually having more cooperation between governments to help shift these supply chains is critical, rather than less.
Thank you very much, Luke. We're going to connect with our hub in Kenya now, but while we do this, we're going to have one more question from my side here, and it's about definition. How important is it, because we don't really have a definition for green steel, and how important is it to get the definition straightened out? Thomas?
I think it's crucial. I think that we can talk about sticks and carrots and whatever, but we certainly have a consumer demand for products with low embedded carbon. I think we can see that this rather clearly, and the passenger car industry is a relevant example here. I think when we are getting rid of tailpipe emissions, the materials in the car is where we have the main environmental impact. And you can even see that is being discussed sometimes already today, how environmentally friendly is a hybrid car, for example, considering rare earth metals and conflict minerals and whatever. So I think there is a consumer demand for products with a low environmental impact. So transparency can achieve a lot. If we have a transparent way of showing customers of Volvo, of SSAB, of other products, exactly what kind of carbon footprint this product has incurred, that will be a great help in driving innovation forward as well. So yes, having a clear definition of what is actually green, what is good enough, what is really something that reduces global CO2 emissions is something that I would very much welcome. There is way too much, I almost said greenwashing now, but there is way too much different messages out there about the environmentally friendliness of various types of materials.
Thank you, Thomas. A question from answer from Jonas, and let's see if we can connect with Nairobi.
And I can only support what you have said in terms of the need of transparency. Volvo Cars did today launch our LCA of our most recent electric car, and what we try to say when launching this is that the world needs more transparency in talking about CO2 emissions of the electric car. There is not yet an agreed and common methodology, and the details are not that disclosed as they should. So an electric car is usually portrayed as zero emission vehicle, even though it is exactly as you say, the emissions are built into the materials, and we need to ensure that we reduce all of them. So there is a very big need of transparency, both in terms of our transparency from us to tell customers, tell investors and the policymakers what is the true emissions of an electric car to be able to act accordingly, as well as transparency in the materials for us to be able to take the decisions to ensure that we are actually attacking the critical areas where we need to reduce emissions. And also just building on your comment regarding if this might sort of reduce our competitiveness, I actually don't see that. I can see your worry, but I would rather argue the opposite, because we see that this is one of our biggest financial risks at the moment. We need to reduce CO2 because we know that our investors are asking this from us. We know that our customers are asking it from us. And it might not be that they are demanding it today, but unless we can do it, this will actually not make us survive in the end. So to me, it's rather the opposite. I think we need to do this to actually stay competitive, not the opposite.
Thank you very much. Let's see if we have Nairobi with us for a question or remark from Mount Kenya University.
Thank you very much, Catalina. So I have two questions from Eddie Getonga. He's asking, what has been the progress of greening buildings in the world at large in a bid to reduce emissions? And the second one, are there workable innovations in 3D printing that can be used in industry and building? And do they really help in mitigating climate change? So I think those are quite general questions and can go out to any of the panelists.
So please repeat the second question, because we are now in the panel with not with the building panel any longer. So maybe the second question was more directed to this panel. So could you repeat it, please?
So the first was what are...
The second question, please. The second.
The second question was, are there workable innovations in 3D printing being used in industry and building? And do they really help in mitigating climate change?
I'm not sure this panel, because we left the building panel, so maybe these questions can be addressed on the app for the experts in buildings, because we are now more towards, well, let's see, does anybody want to address it? You can do it, Luke.
I can help. Yes. I mean, certainly in terms of steel, we've had really fantastic involvement from the building sector. So from an architecture company has just joined actually, as well as engineering companies and consultancy companies and property companies as well. We've just had one company, Barrett Steel, which is actually is a stockist of steel for the building sector. It's got huge warehouses across the United Kingdom and supplies international customers as well. And they've committed to Steel Zero actually just recently. So all those steels that will be going into buildings in the future, they want to help ensure that they have a lower carbon footprint. We have a 2030 target, so to achieve 50% lower carbon steel in their mix by 2030, and then to help drive that pathway towards 2050. So I think there is a relationship there between the built environment and this steel discussion as well.
And it's time to conclude. We need to move on to the next section. Thank you very much, Luke. Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you very much, Jonas from Volvo. And keep up the strong work. If I can, sorry about the pun, strong and steel, but this is really what we need to have in mind to keep up the speed to deliver on the targets. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're moving to a video, a strong message again from UNDP.
Ladies of my future children or even grandchildren to witness the beauty this place we call home, if they are able to withstand the extreme weather without getting a heat stroke or freezing to death. And that makes me feel horrible. It makes me feel restless that that's the reality we're living in today. Now, there are so many things that humankind have accomplished. Building numerous gigantic skyscrapers, and even exploring the outer space with the invention of rockets. But we fail to do just one thing, and that is to protect our home. So dear world leaders, we call on you to protect our home now before it decides to protect itself. Act now before it's too late.
Well, thank you very much. That's a strong message again from the UNDP. So let's now continue and get back Ingmar Rentzhog on stage for some interaction from the We Don't Have Time app. We have people watching and interacting on the app from all over the world. And as Ingmar mentioned before, there is a 50 million reach per month on the We Don't Have Time app, and it's free to download. And please do that and start to act together. So Ingmar, what actions have you seen so far today?
The action so far is regarding material and steel and such things. People on our platform actually love those materials. So I think that it's a challenge to communicate when you're producing something in a better way. You need to communicate it, because if you do communicate it, people have no problem to pay a little extra for it. They will not pay the double price for it, but they will pay what it costs to do it. But in order to have people willing to do that, you need to communicate it. So that is something I'm really glad to see in our network, that many users have a lot of engagement with SSAB and what their like-minded are actually doing. So that's great. But what will be even better is actually that they shouldn't need to communicate how good it is to do steel fossil-free. If we take those fossil fuel subsidies away, we're talking about 48 billion since the climate meeting started. If we just take them away, I'm quite confident that fossil-free steel will be cheaper compared to the alternative. So yes, we need to communicate about good solutions, but we also need to demand those subsidies to go away.
And this counter here, the source is the IMF. So these digits are pretty well calculated. Well, thank you very much, Ingmar Rentzhog, and let's continue to the next segment. We are now moving on to talk about transformers, and I am now handing over to my co-host, Nick Nuttall.
And this segment about disruptors is about breaking the bonds that requires disruptor business, innovations, technologies, and policies, whatever sector you look at, the status quo needs to change to enable emerging companies and initiatives to occupy center stage. I think we're looking for a little vignette graphic to come up at any moment, and we're also going to be moving on as well to a pre-recorded message from Åsa Tamsons, who is Vice President and Head of Business in Area Technologies and New Businesses at Ericsson. With a focus on technology and innovation, Tamsons' team is responsible to drive growth in new areas for Ericsson, and they do this by identifying, developing and scaling new businesses that support Ericsson's customers to capture the full potential of 5G, the Internet of Things and future technologies. Welcome, Åsa. We'd like to hear your pre-recorded message, please.
Hi, my name is Åsa Tamsons. I'm heading up Business Area Technologies and New Business at Ericsson. Ericsson is committed to contribute to a sustainable future. And I'm here today to talk about the role of 5G and new technologies and how they can play an important role as we identify and scale solutions that battle climate change. There's no question that we humans are the main driver of climate change, due to the way we live, the way we consume, how we run our industries. The atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide has been rising extensively since the Industrial Revolution and have now reached dangerous levels. According to the latest IPCC report, climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and some trends are now irreversible. On the other hand, we humans and our ability to innovate and find solutions to seemingly invincible problems are key as we go about to limit the amount of global warming. In the technology sector, Ericsson is leading the way by describing how innovative network performance can reduce energy use. For example, in our Ericsson radio system, we're set to achieve a 35% energy saving by 2022 compared to the legacy portfolio we had in 2016. We're also actively decreasing the company's own carbon footprint. In 2020, we had reduced our emissions by almost 60% compared to 2016, and by over 70% in comparison to 2012. This shows that halving the emissions in less than 10 years is completely possible. Overall, the energy sector, including its own emissions, heat and electricity generated for other industries such as transport and manufacturing, is responsible for about 75% of emissions globally. To reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, the world must undergo a tremendous transformation in energy production, and where 70 to 85% of all electricity generated must come from renewable sources. Today, only around 25% of global electricity come from renewables, but we seem to be on a positive trajectory. Renewable sources of electricity such as wind and solar grew at the fastest rate in 2 decades in 2020. And thanks to the ease of deployment, improving cost competitiveness, they're now set to expand at a much faster pace in coming years than prior to the pandemic. But the dependence on solar and wind sources also create new challenges for electricity producers. One is the network disturbances, as renewable power generation is erratic due to the weather conditions. Electricity is also difficult to store, making it important for power companies to be able to balance generation with consumption. And a third challenge is the fact that renewable energy generation sources are small and widely dispersed. Here is where cellular connectivity and 5G can play an important role. Due to its improved speed, ultra-low latency, which measures how long a signal takes to go from its source to its receiver and back, and its ability to connect more devices at once, 5G is a key enabler in the realization of the smart energy grid and its operations. Thanks to 5G, the energy sector will be able to collect data in near real time, helping them distribute energy in a much more effective, efficient, fast, and secure way. Coupled with advanced storage technology and artificial intelligence in the energy sector, this will allow energy suppliers to feed huge databases from smart sensors. As a result, they will know exactly when to distribute or redistribute power and in what exact amount, leading to a secure and stable power supply and energy savings for industries and for us consumers. Using the intelligence and real-time data provided by a smart energy system, we can better match supply with demand and integrate more renewable energy sources such as wind and solar into the system. But it's not only the energy sector. We need to drive change across all sectors. The industrial sector is responsible for over 30% of the global total carbon dioxide emissions. Enterprises and industries must therefore redouble the decarbonizing efforts, and it begins with increasing efficiency and optimization. To illustrate how 5G connectivity can play a role in driving down cost while lowering energy usage, I want to share an example from the port sector. At the port, the timing of each activity and logistical flows are of essence, and if not managed well, it would negatively impact both costs, safety of personnel, and CO2 emissions. At the port of Livorno in Italy, a digital twin allows workers to operate in the intersection of a cyber and physical world. At Ericsson, we call this phenomenon a collaborative and automated physical world. So let me explain how that works. A large port typically has multiple terminals that can together handle many cargo types. This leads to many inefficiencies and evaluation errors when handling freights on the dock, in the loading and unloading phases of the general cargo ships. The Livorno port terminal now serves as an experimental area covered by a live 5G network. And through that 5G connectivity, massive data is captured in the area from smart sensors, 3D scanning, and wide dynamic range cameras, which is a special device that can handle bright and dark conditions at the same time in an outdoor condition, such as you have at the port. This gives a very detailed view of everything that happens at the port, such as movement, tracking, positioning of forklifts and freights, as well as the inventories of goods, orders of loading and unloading of ships, and providing port operators with live updates and feedback of the processes. The data collected through 5G feeds a digital twin engine, which elaborates a virtual replica of the port area in real time. So having the port area and the general cargo freights cloned in a digital twins make it possible to provide operators of the terminal with smart virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR applications. The VR application, which is experienced using headsets that allow the operator to virtually navigate inside this digital twin model, whereas the AR application allows, for instance, forklift drivers equipped with a rugged, see-through smart headset to see graphical signs and instruction of the freight it should move next. For the Port of Livorno, their live 5G network solution has resulted in considerable efficiency gains, and the solutions that it has powered has now translated into over 8% of CO2 reduction a year, while cost shrank with almost 20%, or over 2.5 million euros. I think this also shows what is possible, and that you can drive healthier, more financial healthy businesses while also battling climate change. And just imagine the impact on climate change if we start to implement the solutions from Livorno across around the 2,000 ports globally. Collaboration is a must. And if we're serious about reaching our goal of net zero emissions by 2050, we need to accelerate innovations and solutions with low carbon technologies across many sectors. In this context, 5G and other digital cellular technologies play a vital role. 5G and cellular technology could soon contribute to an exponential acceleration of global efforts to reduce carbon emissions. And this is done by enabling increasingly interconnected supply chains and networks, improve data sharing to optimize system and drive operational efficiency. For the world to halt global warming and stimulate a shift to a sustainable, circular economy, stakeholders across industries need to adopt an approach founded on transparency, collaboration, and a commitment to drive and implement solutions. This is why Ericsson is engaged in events such as this, the UN Climate Conference, an event that's become a meeting place for companies and stakeholders demanding and finding more actions. Now is the time to imagine how our decisions today can impact our children, our grandchildren, and future generations to come. Let's take a moment to reflect upon what kind of future we want to leave behind for them, and importantly, what actions we will commit to make it happen. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Now we're turning to a bit of a special moment where we have Per Larshans. He's the Director of Sustainability at Ragn-Sells, a major progressive waste management company in the Nordic region. And Per is an award winner in communication. He's an award winner in social sustainability and entrepreneurship. He's listed multiple times by the Trust Across America as one of the top thought leaders in trust. He's currently appointed an expert for setting environmental targets for sea and coastal regions in Sweden and for the coalition group excuse me, for climate neutral Swedish industry by 2045. Per is going to make a keynote speech with us, and then he's going to head a very interesting debate with others on a very unique and special part of the waste management story, the circular economy and climate action. Welcome to the stage, Per Larshans.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you for having me the honor to be able to address you. We all gather here at the COP to discuss how we can reduce the carbon emissions in the world, and that's crucial. I totally agree. The challenge, though, is that there is just 50% of the carbon emissions that are really on the table. So we need to be able to create circular material flows, but the other 50% are in the material that we have in our buildings, in our food we're eating. So how can we do that? Well, first I will also state that Sir Rowan Rockström, together with Sir Richard Attenborough, could also confirm in their last movie, Breaking Boundaries, The Science of Our Planet, state that circular material flows will not only reduce the carbon emissions in the world that we need to fulfill the Paris Agreement, but all other 8 planetary boundaries. So this will be the theme. We will talk about how we can reduce the climate effect from one single project with 400 million tons of carbon dioxide. And the question, of course, if you see it through, is how it will be done. In this session, we will also include the Energy Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simson. We will also call Paris, so we have a discussion with one of the users of this white powder that I hold in my hand. Because here we have the 400 million ton story. The battleground is Estonia. And Estonia has since the 60s been heavily dependent on energy production from oil shale energy production. This is now in the 180 turn. They have decided to exit that energy production. At the same time, they have now 600 million tons of ash stored since the beginning of the 60s. So here the white powder will come in, and therefore I'm very glad also to now introduce Alar Saluste from Ragn-Sells Estonia that will give the story how we've been able to come up with a formula that will use carbon dioxide and restore in the long run also the lands of Estonia. So please, Alar, take the stage.
Thank you, Per, for the introduction. So what we have here is basically a new way of looking how to get raw materials. So far, the way we are getting raw materials is that we dig them up from the ground and we go for the most valuable one. For example, in copper mining, the copper ore is about 0.2% of the total volume, and the rest will be waste. In Ragn-Sells' view, we see that if we approach the materials, especially waste, differently, by going after the material in a logical matter, then we can avoid such high volumes of waste. biological matter, what I mean is that in many cases, for example, for hazardous waste, the part that makes the waste hazardous is actually the easiest accessible material. And a very good example for that is this oil shale ash project that we are running in Estonia. In oil shale ash there is a lot of active calcium that makes the ash react, and thus we are taking the calcium from the ash and we are taking CO2 and putting them together and getting a very high purity calcium carbonate that is used basically everywhere, in the flooring, in the windows, also in paper making. And what is the most important is that this can be only a start. Once we produce calcium carbonate from the ash, we open up an opportunity to also access silica, magnesium, aluminium materials that are great importance for the future.
Okay, we heard a little bit about the story how we are able to, by using carbon dioxide that we put into the ashes, produce this calcium carbonate. It is, to be honest, limestone. And normally when you produce this, you dig it up from the bedrock, you incinerate it, and then you produce it. So the carbon emissions today is partly 50% from today's production of bedrock. The other one is that we will need carbon dioxide to stored, maybe permanently. And I think we will now need to go to Brussels and listen to the Energy Commissioner, Kadri Simson, and her story about what she sees in the potential of this project. So over to Brussels.
We need new, smarter ways of doing things. I'm therefore always glad to participate in events that showcase solutions that are both practical and exciting, bringing our climate and environmental goals one step closer. The oil shale ash project Ragn-Sells has been developing and is presenting today at the COP is a fascinating application of the carbon capture and utilization technology, a technology that is key to our decarbonization effort. I am, of course, especially happy that this project is located in my home country because I know firsthand the issues you are trying to solve with it. Ida-Viru County needs and deserves initiatives like this. Now, let me tell you why I just said that carbon capture, utilization and storage is so important for us in the Commission. The European climate law that entered into force in July this year made our goal to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 legally binding. In practice, this means that all emissions, even those very hard or very expensive to remove, will have to be somehow reined in. This is where CCUS technologies come in. First, these technologies will be particularly important for the sectors where other alternatives for decarbonization do not yet exist or are very expensive, like in the cement or steel production. For these hard-to-abate sectors, CCUS could be the most cost-efficient or even the only way of cutting emissions. Second, some sectors of the economy could never eliminate their emissions. They will continue to occur, say in agriculture or some industries. Even if that is the case, we can still achieve climate neutrality. When the CO2 could be captured and permanently stored, we would be able to create carbon removals that balance the emissions left in the system. Third, significant quantities of hydrogen will be needed for some hard-to-carbonize sectors, for example, steel making, chemicals or refineries. The ultimate objective is to use only green hydrogen from renewable sources. However, blue hydrogen produced with carbon capture could become a good bridging solution, actually speeding up the creation of a hydrogen market. Finally, captured CO2 could be used in products such as chemicals or building materials. This is precisely the purpose of Ragn-Sells project, turning the old heaps of oil shale ash into a useful chemical component with captured CO2. It is a great example of carbon circularity.
That was strong word from the EU Commissioner, Kadri Simson. And I think that we will now need to move to Paris and invite also the last panelist, and that is Arnaud Marquis, the Group Sustainability Officer for one of the biggest flooring companies in the world, Tarkett. So please, Arnaud, what are you doing as a company, and why are you engaged in this important project, as we heard from the European Commissioner?
Good evening, everyone. Hello, Paris. I'm very glad to join you, even though it's from Paris. But let me quickly introduce what we do at Tarkett. So Tarkett is an international company. We're manufacturing flooring solutions on sport surfaces, be it vinyl, linoleum, wood, or artificial turf. Our products are used in various applications, in various locations, in hospitals, schools, hotels, offices, and you might even have some in your home. Every year we sell more than 300 million square meters of floors, which is the equivalent of about 3 times the surface of Paris. So why are we engaged in this cooperation with you, with Ragn-Sells? Maybe I need to explain. So in the past years, we have acquired quite a good knowledge on our carbon footprint, and we know today that to be aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement, by 2030, we must reduce our carbon footprint by 30%. And I can tell you it is very challenging. So to make a long story short, to succeed in such a short period of time, we must cooperate with innovative companies. And for us, this project has 3 advantages. First of all, Ragn-Sells patented processes will use waste that heavily impacts the environment. By using the waste, we are contributing to clean the environment. Secondly, the cooperation will allow us to support the circular economy principles, demonstrating that a waste has an important value. And at Tarkett, we are committed to shift from linear to circular economy. We have been working for many years, and today, many of our products are already compatible with closed loop principles, which means that we can recycle them to manufacture new floors. That's why we already work with our customers to take back and recycle waste of flooring, but also with other industries to turn their waste into valuable materials, like with car industries and with fishing industries, just to name a few. And thirdly, Ragn-Sells patented technology will transform ash into calcium carbonate by capturing carbon dioxide, as you explained, Paris. So we use large quantity of calcium carbonate to manufacture our flooring. So this project will help us to reduce our carbon footprint. And finally, the beauty of this cooperation is that Ragn-Sells process will capture the carbon dioxide, and Tarkett will keep it stored in its flooring for a very long time, thanks to our recycling capabilities. So to conclude, this project is very well aligned with our strategic objectives to reduce our carbon footprint and to develop a circular economy.
Thank you so much. You are a 140-year-old company, and you are still transforming, and that is impressive to listen to. I would like to first address you, Alar. What do you say? You heard now the Energy Commissioner, and you heard also Tarkett and their view. What are your comments?
Well, I think the most important about this project is showing or leading the way, showing that it is impossible, that it's possible to change the world. And this project is a very good example, as everyone else also explained. We are no short of challenges because our raw materials is waste. CO2, ash, both are waste. But by taking small steps and working together, I think we can shape the future.
And Arnaud, have you any final comment from Paris, reflecting on what you heard from Alar and the Energy Commissioner?
I would say that with this project, once again, we have a very good example that we can turn waste into a valuable material. And that's really what we believe in at Target. And what we have demonstrated as well is that it's not only good for the environment, it's also very good for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, because we tend to underestimate significantly the impact which is coming from the incineration of products at the end of its life. So by developing the circular economy, by working on the waste management, we have many positive impacts, both on the environment and also on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you, Arnaud. Thank you, Alar. And we also send our thanks to the Energy Commissioner. This white powder, 400 million CO2 can be stored forever if we make sure that we create circular material flows. We will avoid also to digging up limestone from the bedrock, creating other environmental challenges. Annually, today, 22 million tons are being dug up in the world every year. And here we have the possibility to both restore the lands of Estonia at the same time as we can produce something that really are needed in many places all over the world. On Sunday the 7th, you will have the possibility to deep dive more into the problems and the challenges in Estonia, because then we will also broadcast our climate dialogue with the Estonian Prime Minister, the Estonian President, and also the Energy Commissioner. And I will again, of course, have both Alar and Arnaud with me. So Sunday, tune in at Winter Times app, and you will be able to see the full 50 minutes. Thank you so much for listening.
You don't have to believe in climate change. You only have to know that all your partners, trading partners, the ones with whom you trade in services as well, they simply will not buy goods and services which are produced not in a clean way.
We have a saying, those who are late will get nothing. We don't want to be left behind. We want to find Estonian niche where we could be strong, where we could be number one in the world.
This ultra-pure and carbon-neutral calcium carbonate are produced of oil shale ash remains after electricity production.
What is very nice is that we are using two waste streams, the ash and the calcium from it, and also CO2. And we put them together, and we have a fantastic product for the market. Something that is used in everyday items, calcium carbonate.
This is precisely the purpose of Ragn-Sells project, turning the old heaps of oil shale ash into a useful chemical component with captured CO2. It is a great example of carbon circularity.
Right, well that was really interesting. And what we'd like to do now, after that fantastic look into how you can reuse the waste from oil shale, is to actually talk to some of our hubs right now. What about Nairobi? Can we see Nairobi anywhere? Hi guys. Anybody got a question from any of the last things they've seen?
Thank you very much, Nick. And we were not very busy. We were busy listening, and I don't think we have a question at this particular moment.
Okay.
Yes, but
I think we may have to go to the next video, which is the pre-recorded COP for Dummies. Can we maybe swing that video right now?
I think COP for Dummies, let's use the 5 letters in Paris, because after all, a lot of the negotiations are centered around the Paris Agreement. Of course, Paris starts with P. P in our COP for Dummies is for a conference of the parties. Now, parties might sound like a lot of fun, but the parties here reference to the negotiating parties, and that is in fact the countries. Now, all the other actors involved and present at the COP, be that NGOs, businesses, and so forth, it's good that they're there. They're delivering pressure, they're helping us deliver on the climate targets, but they're not formally parties, and they're not negotiating what's at stake at the COP26. The A is for adaptation. Adapting to a changing climate is unfortunately necessary because we overslept when it came to reducing emissions. And the Paris Agreement is very clear that we have to focus equally much on reducing, mitigation, and adapting climate adaptation. That is true for climate finance, that is true for the national determined contributions from each of the parties and so forth. So look out for climate adaptation. R, in our 5-letter abbreviation of the COP in Paris, R is for emissions reductions. And I'm glad to see that we have significant emissions reductions at the tables, including the European Union saying they're going to be climate neutral by 2050, the US also pledging 2050, China 2060, and so forth. And of course, emissions reductions is also what we count on from ourselves, from our companies, and from cities and others. I is for intensified efforts or enhanced actions. The Paris Agreement says that every 5 years, starting this time at the COP26, every country has to intensify their efforts, have to bring up enhanced actions, both in terms of reducing emissions and in terms of adaptation. And I'm glad to say that we see that happening. Most of the major emitters and most of the countries around the world have delivered enhanced action in their nationally determined contributions on mitigation and in many cases also on adaptation. S, finally, in our 5-letter COP for Dummies, S is for shared ambition. And it's important to realize that even though a lot of the nationally determined contributions and a lot of the efforts that we see are nation by nation, in fact, this is about doing things together. And the parts that remain to be finalized in the Paris Agreement, including the famous Article 6, are about the mechanisms to make sure that this shared burdens and working together is finalized and fine-tuned in the mechanism. And this is also a hand that's reached out to you and I, to organizations and to companies, that even though we're not formally part of the negotiations, we are part of sharing the efforts to reach the climate targets that's so important to the well-being of the future of this world, to meet the 1.5 degree targets of the Paris Agreement.
So, thank you very much indeed to Matthias Goldman for that video, which kind of leads us into our next segment, which is about behavioral change. We need to change people's mindsets. We need to change people's mindsets not just in the public, but also in governments and also in corporations and also totally around the world. And I'd like to first invite the founder of We Don't Have Time and the CEO, Ingmar Rentzhog, to the stage for a quick chat on this issue of behavioral change. I mean, you set up We Don't Have Time very much with the concept that we needed to connect people around the world on climate action, but that we also needed to recruit more people to understand that climate action was important. So it is part of behavioral change, is it not?
I would say behavioral change for me is so much more than eating vegetarian food or changing your own lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
That is not that's important, but we will never solve this challenge if we don't change the system. And I think our counter here shows that very, very clearly. I mean, if you don't fly, if you eat plant-based food, you don't, you walk to the, you don't have a car, etc., etc. You do everything right.
Mm-hmm.
And our government's still sponsoring the destruction.
Yeah.
Do you think it will work?
Exactly.
So for me, behavioral change is about changing the society and giving the power to the people to do that change. Because individuals, it's very hard to change things alone. But if we connect people, and we connect them with the leaders we have, and if we broadcast that to the whole world, we have right now here about 700,000 viewers. Yesterday we had 1 million.
Mm-hmm.
If we reach out with the action we do, and if we bring those people that wants to have change together, working together with help of technology, we will be able to change that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's behavioral change, empowering people to working together and change the system. But that doesn't mean you're not supposed to change your lifestyle. I don't think you should change your lifestyle in order to showcase for others that you're trustworthy when you're talking about the climate. I don't think that's so important. I think it's much more important to change your lifestyle so that you understand what's needed to change in the society. It's very hard to understand what's needed to be done if you're not walking the talk, if you're not living the change.
Yeah.
That's why we need individual change. But when we do the individual change, it will have zero effect almost if we don't communicate that and demand change from the system. So we need to do both. And what we have developed a tool, an app, downloaded on your phone, go to wedon'thavetime.org. It's a tool where you could use your power, use your voice, and our leaders will actually listen. Yeah. Presidents has answered the climate reviews on the platform. Jeff Bezos has answered climate reviews. Mark Zuckerberg, governments, large corporations. You can have that conversation on a platform, and a conversation is a really good thing. So what's actually happening in the We Don't Have Time app is COP, 24 hours, and everyone is invited.
And let me ask one last question on this, because everybody has a different journey to how they got where they got to. What made you want to actually develop We Don't Have Time as a way of mobilizing climate action?
It was actually very much because of Donald Trump. When he won the US election almost exactly 5 years ago,
right.
It became so clear to me that our world leaders, that they will not do anything about the climate crisis. I mean, we see that clearly. They're just sponsoring this destruction. They blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump was the first world leader that told the truth. I mean, he told everyone, I don't give a shit. The rest are telling everyone, we do a lot, but they don't. So it became so clear to me that they would not change themselves. So we need to change the system. And in order to do that, I came up with this idea to create a platform, like a review platform similar to TripAdvisor, because that has changed the traveling industry. Can we change the whole business so we make it profitable to do the right thing? Businesses and leaders that are doing stuff are getting climate love, and those that are doing the bad stuff are getting climate warning.
Yeah.
So that was the idea behind it, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I just started it, and 1 year later I sold my old company that was a financial communication firm, and have been working with it 24/7 since then.
So, I mean, I think everybody's got some kind of journey to a new moment, and what we're hoping for with We Don't Have Time is to give people that opportunity to, in a sense, glimpse that there can be a different pathway that they themselves can travel down. Yeah. And I think that's a very a powerful message and a powerful way of activating people to the reality of what's happening with their world, for sure, yeah. I think we're still looking for one of our other guests who might be coming on to talk about behavior change. What is your feeling about these COPs? I mean, they're huge events. We have loads of people coming here. I don't know how many are in Glasgow right now, maybe 25,000. Yeah. We had 40-odd thousand in Paris.
It takes 2 hours to get in here, so it's crazy.
Well, that creates some behavioral change, which is called learning patience. But we don't have time for climate action not to happen quickly. We can't be too patient. But what do you think these COPs do in terms of whether they build change, build awareness, build action?
I think it's very important to have a gathering where everyone get together and have a dialogue about this and focus on trying to do something. But I think we will fool ourselves if we think COP is a solution. COP is just one tool in the toolbox. But nothing will happen inside this building if we don't have the pressure from outside. So it's so important for everyone to get loud and demand change from our leaders. And it's very much more easy to demand change if you have the leaders in the same room. So this is a golden opportunity to actually focus on this issue. And I'm very pleased that this COP for the first time is something that the world media is actually covering. It's over 4,000 journalists here. That's a lot of journalists. I mean, every important journalist are actually here in this building covering the story of humanity. And when I started We Don't Have Time, media they didn't care about the climate. People were sleeping. Now people are awake, and there's this discussion inside here. They could be from like a Greenpeace event 5 years ago. I mean, people are talking about the seriousness. That's great. People are starting to be aware, but we need leaders that act. And I mean, leaders could say, like India, for example, they're pledging to go fossil-free in the year 2070. Are they insane? It's madness. 2070, the leaders in India will be dead for a long time before that. So they are pledging, basically, that their children or grandchildren will solve this in a future when you can't solve the problem. And on the same time, they are increasing this number. I mean, we could have COPs, we could talk about pledges, but if we are continuing to sponsoring the fossil fuel industry with trillions of US dollars yearly, it's a waste of time.
This really has to change. Very true indeed. Look, I think that's a fantastic segue into two of our next guests who are coming on for a panel. Thank you very much, Ingmar. And we're going to have some new guests coming on. Do you want to stay for the panel yourself, or?
Am I invited?
Yeah, you can. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Well, there we go. Come on then. So the next person I'd like to call to the stage is Marco Maggini. He's Executive Director of Climate Projects at South Pole. He spent the past 12 years working in the voluntary and compliance carbon markets and climate policy thought leadership. And he holds a role as Director of Projects and Portfolio Management in South Pole. He's got a team of more than 200 experts around the world, currently managing more than 300 projects worldwide. And of course, at the heart of this is basically people and companies, in a sense, using some of their money to invest in projects such as, I suppose, forest, but also fuel switching and all kinds of other things, which we'll learn about in a moment. We also have, I hope by the magic of Zoom, Kalle Nilver, who's a co-founder of Go Climate. Kalle has co-founded two companies in the Stockholm tech scene. That's Booli and Senspit Group. When realizing the severity of the climate crisis, he co-founded Go Climate. Go Climate wants to enable individuals and businesses to take meaningful climate action, and today Go Climate has over 8,000 members and has helped over 800 companies. And last but not least is Dr. Jennifer Jenkins. She's Chief Sustainability Officer at NCX. With a technical background in carbon cycling and ecosystem science, Dr. Jenkins brings more than 25 years of experience on matters at the intersection of forests and climate across government, academia, and the private sector. And she was part of the intergovernmental panel, the IPCC on climate change, the science panel that in 2007 won the Nobel Peace Prize, along with former Vice President Al Gore. Fantastic. All right. So, let's have a little chat about this whole area right now. So, firstly, Marco, tell us a little bit what you're doing in terms of your work at South Pole.
So, my team mobilized finance on the ground in more than 25 countries around the world. to develop all sorts of different projects that mitigate the impacts of climate change, so emission reduction projects, with also community engagement and adaptation components. So this project can be RED, so avoided deforestation, but also tree planting, cook stove, water purification, renewable energy all around the world. So we actually call the South Pole because our focus is to work on the southern hemisphere where there is more need and the more severe impacts of climate change will take place.
Right, I'm glad you clarified that, because when I heard South Pole for the first time, I thought you were doing tree projects in Antarctica, which seemed a little bit like a kind of unimaginable prospect, but...
a 3-degree scenario, you know?
Maybe. Okay, let's go over to Callie in where are you, Callie? Where are you coming in from? Tell us about what you do.
Yes, hello, thank you for inviting me. I'm in Åre in north of Sweden right now, and I started the Go Climate 4 years ago. And we believe that individuals and companies can contribute to stopping climate change in a big way. And just as Ingmar said earlier, we believe actually that individuals and companies need to act because our leaders are not acting enough, not fast enough, and not big enough. So we at Go Climate help individuals and companies focus on high impact climate action, both within their value chain, so within their own carbon footprint by calculating their carbon footprint and reducing their carbon footprint, but also outside of their value chain. So supporting climate projects via offsets or compensation or whatever you want to call it, and also other things for individuals, signing petitions, contact politicians, and attending climate strikes. And for companies, it could be changing your business model and other things.
Well, that's quite wide-ranging. Let's go over to Dr. Paris Climate Change Agreement has a missing piece in its jigsaw puzzle, which is known as Article 6, to those that know what articles of treaties are. But for most ordinary people, it's carbon markets, though that's not really an ordinary topic either for most people. And then there's something called voluntary carbon markets. It's a bit of a highly polarized, to use the pun of the South Pole, a highly polarized area. Maybe I could hear from you your perspectives. Why might we need carbon markets? Why might they be important? And what does it mean for fighting climate change? Who would like to take that first?
Maybe I could do it.
Yes, all right then.
My answer to that is that we need to make it profitable to do the right thing and unprofitable to do the wrong thing. Yep. And if you need to pay when you're polluting, and sponsoring something that is good, you're actually achieving this behavioral change by the offsetting. Maybe not just because of the tree planted, but because of the cost you need to pay in order to plant the tree.
Right.
So I think carbon markets is very important in that aspect.
Maybe I can build on that.
Yes, please do.
I think, we have, the IPCC tells us we have a very small window opportunity for action. And I would like to move away from this polarized discussion, carbon markets, non-carbon markets. Carbon markets is one of many instruments that we will need in these 10 years towards a transition. We have a fossil fuel-based economy, and there will be a number of residual emissions that will be hard to tackle. So we need to do everything that is possible to reduce where we can reduce. And as he said, we need to compensate for the rest. First of all, to put a price on carbon, and second, also to put money on the ground in countries that at the moment don't have the finance to actually finance this transition. And this is just not about profit and so on. It's also about communities that have access to this finance and can adapt to what is already happening, which is global warming.
Anybody else like to come in? Jennifer?
Yeah, I would add to that we're really good at valuing timber, right? The sort of very tangible impact and sort of products that we can generate from our forests. What we're less good at is valuing the services that those forests provide. And so I think the voluntary carbon market is a really great way to enable us to value and sort of internalize those externalities of carbon emissions and climate impact.
Would you like to say something, Keller? Where does this come in for you?
I think we all agree that we need to tenfold, if not hundredfold, the amount of climate financing going into climate projects and mitigation. So seeing carbon offsets or compensation as a tool to do this, not the only tool, but one important tool that actually scales quite well and actually gives businesses an incentive to voluntarily give money to climate change, to stop climate change. I think that's where it lands for me. It's a great tool to mobilize climate finance.
I mean, it's not the only area, though. Of course, I mean, this is one part of the potential financial flows. I mean, we've got the big pension funds. We've got, you know, we've got our own bank savings accounts. You know, there are things that people can do in their own lives. They can offset their emissions, but they can also vote with their feet in terms of how their pensions are being spent. Yeah, so I think that the problem with the carbon market is become so polarized with some people that they think it's the only flow of finance. It's part of a suite of initiatives that need to be taken with finance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not as glamorous when you're having your dinner party, but try to push your employer to change their pension provider in countries where you can is by far one of the most impactful action that one individual can take. And I can never stress enough, people, you know, when you talk in schools or university, they ask, what can I do? I was like, maybe it's early for you, but next thing, ask your employer, where are my pension money?
I'd like to ask you, Kalle, a little bit about, you mentioned changing businesses' mindsets. That might include offsetting, but it probably includes a hell of a lot of other things. Just tell us, give us a glimpse into that.
I mean, the economy we are in right now need to change a lot, especially for producing companies. For service companies, it's they can do a lot within their own carbon footprint, but it's actually quite limited for most service companies. But for producing companies, I mean, we need to strive towards a full circular economy in some way. So changing your business model towards more circularity and towards more reusability is what we try to help companies with. It's quite difficult because it often needs to go to the board of directors. It needs to go to the core of the company, and you need to still pay salaries, and you need to still have a functioning financing of the company. But it is possible for many companies to take lead and to make changing your business model as part of your brand identity and part of how you can move your business forward. It's really, really exciting work, because we are in a situation right now where we know that in 20 years or 30 years, we cannot continue as we can today. And I mean, we can short term, or companies can short term continue as they do today. But even though it's not good, it doesn't take the world in the right direction. They actually can, like, legally continue as they do today. But in 10 years or 20 years, when laws are coming and politicians get more brave and the pressure gets more harder, business won't be able to continue and produce things like they do today. So it's a really exciting area where so much need to change really fast. And there's a huge opportunity for companies, I think, to actually take lead and be part of this change and as an opportunity.
Let me almost bring this to an end right now, but maybe I'll go back to Jennifer for maybe the last, maybe not the last word, but the first of the last words. Do you expect here at the COP that we might see an outcome on carbon markets? If not, when? Because everyone's looking for new guardrails, aren't they? They're looking for some kind of rules that can allow the carbon markets to flourish. Do we need those new rules? Are they important? What do you think might come out of Glasgow?
Yeah, I'm, having participated in a couple of COPs, I'm not sure how optimistic I am about real huge change coming out of the COP. But I do think that action is happening right now on voluntary carbon markets through mechanisms like the task force on scaling voluntary carbon markets, where the whole community is getting together to try to solve some of those sort of systemic problems that we see in terms of scaling the markets. I just want to also say I'm really encouraged by all the good work that corporations and companies are making in progress toward net zero. I think that's a really positive sign. And we will eventually see customers and consumers holding those companies accountable for actually reaching those net zero targets in predictable ways that I think will be actually lead us toward the outcome we need by 2030 and beyond.
Got you. Anybody else want to wrap up that section there?
Yes, that's why it's so important to not just call out the polluters, but also shout out about those that are doing the action. All the leaders, all the companies that act today, maybe not perfect, but they're starting to act. We need to encourage them. We need to support them. And we need to share their stories so they will do more of it. Super important. And I'm really frustrated when people talk down and when people are trying, because everyone will stop trying if they're only getting criticism as they do it. So it's really important to shout out. And you can do it in the We Don't Have Time app.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd also like to add, it's so easy to just get started now. It's so easy to just do something and get started today even. So I would really encourage everyone listening, just do something today. It matters. Every ton and every action counts.
Good, that's great, because sometimes we're all in a bubble. We think everybody's doing everything because we're on shows like We Don't Have Time and everybody's really super cool. But we forget that outside there's sometimes this bubble, an expanding bubble of course, which is good, but there are people outside that expanding bubble that really haven't got the idea they can do something to make a better world. So thanks everybody, thanks for being on the show. That's great, and we're going to just invite now up onto the stage a guest that we were hoping to have on earlier, but he's here now, so we're very, very happy. He's Johan Falk. He's co-founder and CEO of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. He's a key person behind the Exponential Roadmap, the 1.5 Business Playbook, and many, many, many other things. Senior Innovation Fellow at the Stockholm Resilience Centre, Future Earth, and so on and so forth. Johan, it's lovely to see you here. We just wanted a bit of a keynote from you about this issue of behaviour change. What can we change as people? Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. It's great to be here again. Thanks for that, yes. So my key message is that we need to start to shift our consumption to halve down emissions. And the question is, of course, who are we? Well, I would say it's we, the wealthy. We, the wealthy, need to go in the front line. I think that is the key point. And we can start to halve our emissions once, we need to do it twice, we need to do it 3 times. But let's start a little bit with a big picture. We talked about science and what is required from a scientific viewpoint. Yes, from a global perspective, we need to halve emissions every decade. We need to halve emissions by 2030. We also know that the solutions exist to halve emissions by 2030. And then it's of course a question, is this an issue for business or is it an issue for the consumers, we as consumers? Because of course the business has a tremendous responsibility actually to provide the solutions which makes it possible to shift our lifestyles. But it won't work unless we also have a pull from us consumers who actually demand these products. So both are just as important. We need leading initiatives, both from business, as we're doing with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative as an example, shifting their complete portfolio of products to become sustainable, but also from consumers. And the opportunity is so obvious. 10% of the people on the planet is sort of responsible for 50% of the emissions. So that's the starting point, and 1% is responsible for 15%. So if we don't sort of move this group together, which we are sort of part of, we will never succeed. I think this is just absolutely essential. And why is it so important to sort of drive it from the most wealthiest? Well, firstly, they can afford the shift. They can actually shift their consumption and pay more for sustainable products. So they can actually help the exponential acceleration of, renewable energy, electrical cars, sharing, all the solutions we need to scale. And the third thing is, of course, they are role models for the middle class to copy. And another thing is really important, that it's when you actually start to shift your consumption, you start to take action in your work, in your community, so it spills over to everything else you're doing. I actually think it's very difficult to drive climate action in your company unless you understand what it means practically. So I talk with some of these leading initiatives we have in the Nordics, B-Change, Climate Hero, Deedster and Citra. So I asked them a little bit, they are working with thousands or hundreds of thousands of consumers in terms of shifting consumption to cut emissions. And what is sort of their takeaway on a couple of questions? The first question is sort of how fast can you reduce emissions? We know carbon law is 10 years, but actually what is really interesting is from all these 4 initiatives that it's proven that when people start to actually shift consumption, they can cut it by 30 to 50% in 2 years, which is really incredible. So that was the first question. Pardon? You suddenly got a cheer from somewhere in the room. Okay, thanks. Okay. And the second question is, will this improve quality of life, or do you have to give up a lot of things? And I would say also from all these initiatives, a key conclusion is, well, it will improve quality of life in terms of health and in terms of feeling that you actually walk the talk. And even financially, because you can sort of cut some unnecessary consumption. I think that is an important key point. But it's also important to state that if you already cut your emissions, maybe to 50%, maybe you shouldn't push it further because it can actually sort of decrease your quality of life. So one, of course, observation is that it might be good to cut it by 50%, and ensuring that it's actually something positive for you, but then instead focus on influencing other people and spreading it, and wait a little bit for society to adapt. Finally, the question is, of course, if we see this tremendous potential, it can improve quality of life, why doesn't it happen on scale? What are the sort of key blockers? Well, people say it's about habits, of course. It takes, an effort to change a habit. Sometimes it could be price and availability of good climate solutions, that you need to do a lot of research around it. And maybe sort of the most important one is that we very much follow what other people are doing. So the point of the togetherness and getting a movement among the wealthiest to actually shift their consumption, I think is so incredibly important and needs to be the next step. So it's not only businesses, we actually need it to ensure that this becomes the new normal, as far as I see it.
Yes. Got you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you very much indeed. Maybe we can just invite back the panelists that were with us before. For example, whether our colleague here from South Pole could just come up. Jennifer, are you still with us in Washington, D.C.? And Kalle, you're there. Yes, please, just come up again. Marco will be coming up in a second. He's just having his microphone put back on. Here he is. So we just listened to what Johan was saying. I mean, do you get a sense that these are similar thoughts that you might hold as well, that actually the rich could change enormously their carbon profile, and in doing so actually cut emissions, but also in a sense set an example to others about what could possibly be done over time? we've seen these reports before, haven't we, in newspapers about if so many percentage of the very rich stopped doing this or did that, we'd see unprecedented cuts in emissions. Is that a topic of interest or not? Gentlemen, ladies.
Yes.
Did you get that, Jennifer, in Washington? No, she didn't.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, when you were listening to maybe Johan Falk from the Exponential Roadmap and the 1.5 Playbook talk about this. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Sorry, I am here, but I can't hear you.
It's clearly not happening. Okay, all right. Maybe the White House is behind you and they're trying to shut you off or something. Who knows? Well, maybe Marco and maybe Kalle, you could come in on this. I mean, what is this? Is it right that we should focus on the rich? Is that important? Is it not important? Give us your perspective on that.
I think there is a historical responsibility, which was already reflected in the Kyoto Agreement, from the richest country who are responsible for the emission until now. So I think there is a political question that needs to be addressed and taking responsibility for this emission.
Yeah.
So I totally buy into the argument that...
But what about the richest in the richest countries?
Yeah, no, and I think that that's the political question, that there is the richest in the richest country who take the responsibility. And also, there will be a cost with this transition, which is necessary. And of course, it will be minuscule compared to the alternative, which is business as usual and the worst impact of global warming. But it's important that this is bared by the richest part of our population and that certain things change accordingly.
Kalle, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, sure. I mean, I think the end solution to the climate crisis is going to be political. We need a political solution. I don't think that's the question. The question is how we get there as fast as possible. And I like the focus on individuals there, and I like the focus on the rich part of the individuals there as well. Because individuals can act now. It's really simple for individuals to change their consumption or change their behavior, or easy is maybe exaggeration, but it's possible to do today, right now. You can go to goclimate.com and register. It takes 1 minute. You can stop flying. It takes 0 seconds to decide to do that.
Yeah.
You can write an email to a politician. It takes 1 minute as well.
Yeah.
So, and I love the thought of a fairness perspective, taking responsibility for your emissions. That's really, I really like that. It appeals to me. And I think when individuals change and individuals takes the first step, it will be much easier for politicians to make radical changes in their policies and to introduce radical laws. And it will also be easier for companies to change their business models. If individuals are wanting to have sustainable products or zero carbon products, net zero carbon products, it will be so much easier for companies to do that if individuals have already taken the step at first.
Yeah.
So I really like that, even though I wish it wasn't necessary. It's not where we are today. It is necessary. So I like it. I think it's a correct analysis and a great thing to do right now.
And we're running, or we're supporting the UNDP campaign on fossil fuel subsidies. The counter now says that $39 billion have been spent on fossil fuel subsidies since the COP started. I think if some really rich people started hitting their governments about this, there might be a bit of a fast change on this, rather than, I mean, we don't have time, I'm sure has a lot of influence, but if some of the richest said, this is no longer acceptable, that might actually work and could be one of their contributions to shifting the global economy. What do you think, Johan?
Yeah, most definitely, of course. But I also think if you have, let's assume you have 100 tons of emissions as an individual, you can pretty easy cut that to 50, which I think is a pretty good achievement.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go to 1 ton immediately, but to get the richest on the planet to start to cut by half is sort of straightforward as far as I see it.
Yeah.
Because even if you are like in Sweden, as I said, from these typical initiatives, it's possible for people who haven't done anything previously to quite easily cut by 50%. So just think about if we get sort of hundreds of millions of people starting to think in that way, we will get a tremendous shift in demand as well.
Well, I've got an interesting point then. So if a rich person with 100 tons of emissions cut by 50%, what do they do with the other 50%? Can they invest in South Pole or Go Climate? Can they offset a proportion of... It's just an interesting point, right, in the whole debate about offsets. Because, of course, we say, for example, the Exponential roadmap, I think it's 10%, isn't it? That companies might be allowed to do something with. But what about rich people? Should they compensate some of their emissions on their journey to net zero?
I think definitely they should use their financial power. They should put all their, their funds, stocks and investments in sort of in companies which is aligned with 1.5. So just think about it. Even if they have a small impact in terms of consumption, when they start to rethink, they will shift their complete portfolio as far as I see it. So maybe not see it as an offset, which I'm arguing for, but actually see it as an investment in nature and climate and the future. And of course it's reasonable when you make that investment to at least cover your own emissions. But I think the rich people can do maybe 100 times or something like that. So
it's an interesting concept. And I'm being told we have to wrap up this session now, but I do like the idea of countries, companies, cities setting net zero targets by 2050, and that very, very rich people with currently 100 tons worth of emissions should declare net zero by 2050 or probably sooner. Maybe 2030. 2030 then. We'll put it at 2030. Thanks guys for sticking around. Thanks very much, Johan, for being on here. Great to have you on again, and talk to you later. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. We'd like to now go over to the Stockholm hub if we can. Stockholm, are you with us? Because we'd like to hear a keynote from Nina Ekelund, who is the CEO at Haga Initiative.
Hi, we are here at COP26 to find a common roadmap on how to take care of our most valuable resource, our planet. The latest IPCC report has a clear message to us. There is no longer any doubt that human emissions of greenhouse gases are the cause of the global warming that is taking place. Resource extraction and processing accounts for almost 50% of the global carbon dioxide emissions and almost 90% of the loss of biodiversity. Sustainable use of resources is therefore essential for us to be able to achieve the Paris Agreement. Climate, resource efficiency and biodiversity should be treated as one agenda. It's complex and difficult, but that cannot stop us. My name is Elin Larsson and I'm the Program Director of Resource. Resource is a Swedish strategic innovation program funded by the Swedish Energy Agency, Vinnova and Formas. Our vision is to create sustainable use of materials within the planetary boundaries, and the main focus of our work is to fund innovation projects. Some of more technical solutions, but also process innovation and policy innovation, as well as projects gathering new facts to create knowledge. The recently launched report, The Future of Nature and Business, shows that 3 big systems endanger around 80% of the threatened or near-threatened species, and infrastructure and built environment stand for 29% of those. But the report also shows that a transition for the sector could mean a great business opportunity. $3 trillion and 117 million jobs. So we know so much already about what is wrong with our system and what is needed to be fixed, but it's the how that we're kind of lacking at the moment. And we at Resource have research telling us that we, for instance, treat our buildings as single-use products. We have made analysis that shows that material flows of steel, aluminium, and plastics in Europe, and those are common materials in the building sectors, they have a value loss of 60% after first usage, a value of 87 billion euros. Once again, a great business opportunity. We just launched a new innovation agenda for sustainable use of resources, the the RE-agenda, and it's setting up goals for 2030. It lists 7 priorities on how to get there and highlight 3 focus areas for research and innovation. In the agenda, we highlight that the most important first steps when looking at sustainable use of materials is to review whether the need can be met without producing a product. For some sectors, such as construction, the greatest positive impact on sustainable resource use is not achieved through material circulation, but by maintaining and efficiently using existing buildings and infrastructure. So maybe the most bold buildings are the ones already built, and the most bold buildings are the ones we start using in new ways to optimize the space. In the debate, most of the hope goes to new technology, but I would say it's more about innovation in terms of behaviors, organization, processes, collaboration, and policies, something that one of our latest reports also points out. Business opportunities and competitiveness are key drivers for creating change, but we can and should make demands on private companies and the public sector to drive the transition, but we should also acknowledge that policy instruments, regulations, and financial incentives will be needed whenever market forces are not enough. A stable political situation combined with predictable rules and legislation are what make organizations willing to invest in innovation and transformation. Only then can we reach a critical mass that take us beyond the tipping point needed to bring out a system change. Today, it's cheaper and easier to make bad choices when it should really be the other way around. We have to change the rules of the game. It's time for bold leaders that dares to take bold decisions without having the decision basis that they are used to. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That was actually Ellen Larsson, not indeed Nina Ekelund. But we do have Nina here with us, thank goodness. Thank you very much indeed for being here, Nina. She's the CEO of Haga Initiative. In 2010, Nina founded the business network Haga Initiative, and in recent years, Nina has been on the list of the 100 most powerful people in sustainability Sweden. In 2014, she was named Sweden's most environmentally powerful woman. She has previously worked at the Environmental Administration in Stockholm, the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, the Prime Minister's Office, and the Stockholm Resilience Centre. Over to you, Nina, for your keynote. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and really great to be here at We Don't Have Time. So thank you for having me. I started together with the company's business network, the Haga Initiative, for more than 10 years. And the vision is a profitable business without climate impact. Haga Initiative have a strategy to go below 1.5 degrees. And all the companies in the network have a net zero target until 2030. And that is what Johan Falk was talking about, halving the emission every decade, and we are doing more than that. But right now, I'm going to talk about carbon pricing and Call on Carbon. That's a Nordic initiative that have really got big support from the world. And we are heading towards a 2.7 degree world, and mitigations actions are lagging behind. We can see that climate change is accelerating. So we need to fivefold the ambitions to stay below 1.5. We are one investment cycle away from 2050. Only a fraction of the GHG emissions have an effective price on carbon. About 22% of the emissions in the world are covered with a carbon price, and only 5% of these have an effective price. Last year, the governments raised about $45 billion in revenues from carbon pricing, while, and now we're going to talk about fossil fuels subsidies, amounted to $478 billion. That's 10 times more in subsidies for fossil fuels. So we want to get a large volume visible support for carbon pricing before the COP26, and now we are here in Glasgow. And this call on carbon covers over 100 businesses, cities, universities, business associations supporting call on carbon. That means representing over 60 million companies and farmers, and that is more than 1/4 of the businesses in the world. And they are supporting call on carbon to encourage governments to introduce effective carbon pricing instrument that is consistent with their net zero targets. And that is to create a stable and predictable investment environment. And we also say in the call that we want to finalize the rules in the market mechanism, Article 6. Together with my Nordic colleagues in the business networks in Norway, Shift, and in the Finnish network, CLC. We started this call in spring, and now we have got the support for over 25% of the businesses in the world. I would like to say also, in Sweden, we could see that carbon pricing and EU ETS, we could see that the GDP have gone up 84%, while the carbon emissions have gone down 29%. That's a strong decoupling of emissions from economic growth. Call on Carbon want to spur green investments. As I said in the beginning, we need to fivefold the ambitions, and that's why we need a price on carbon. So between the actions here now in Glasgow and the actions in hopefully in Cairo, where we will meet the next time, we will hope to get even greater support and get the governments to understand the need for carbon pricing. So if you want to sign call on carbon, you find it calloncarbon.com. And thank you for having me, and thank you, we don't have time.
Well, thank you so much, Nina, and I'm sure you'll get lots of people signing up for that. It sounds like a really great campaign, and putting a proper price on carbon has just got to be so sensible. Yeah, such a good idea. Thanks very much, Nina. Okay, maybe we'd like to see if Nairobi is there. Oh no. Yes, we can see Nairobi, but no, we can see Stockholm now. Hello, David. Come in.
Hello, Nick. Stockholm is here.
Okay, what about back in East Africa? It must be pretty late for you right now, but are you with us?
Yes, we are still with you, Nick. It's a bit late, heading to midnight. Yes, but we are being together. Yes.
Okay. Well, look, thank you so much for being a part of the show. You have a really safe journey home, and yeah, kwaheri.
Thank you very much. Karibu sana, and see you tomorrow.
Okay. Right. Well, we've ended our section here on behavioral change, and we're moving into what we call the outro section. I wonder if Katarina, for example, could join us for coming up on stage right now. No, maybe not, but we can have Johan Falk, for example. We could join on the stage right now. Johan Falk, we'd like to see you. And we'd like to see, I think we'd like to see Ingmar as well. Come on.
No one wants to join you.
Nobody wants to join me. Everyone's had enough of me talking, but I'm going to talk a little bit more to introduce you all onto the show. Yeah, I know that not that many of us could listen to every single detail of what was actually being talked about today, but I thought it was actually one of the more fascinating shows that we had, and one of the more fascinating debates we had, linking buildings with industry, and this incredible opportunity of cutting our emissions through the way we manage buildings, but also this whole debate on can we move these big users of steel, not just buildings, but the car manufacturing, to green steel, and what is green steel? That was another interesting question that came up. But any perspectives of the show from anybody there?
Would you like to start, Johan?
Well, as you said, I think the opportunity, if you can get the leaders in also the high-emitting sectors, such as steels, cars, and so on, really show that it is achievable to radically cut emissions. I think that's incredibly powerful. And it's also about companies collaborating, what we call radical collaboration, because it doesn't make sense if you just try to solve it on your own. You have to work through the value chain, all the way upstream and downstream, all the way down to the consumers. And I think that's really clear from some of the examples as well.
Yeah. I wonder if you reflect a little bit on what Martina said from the United Nations Environment Programme at the beginning, because she was talking about these global assessments they do through the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, and saying that, yes, there had been some improvements in terms of buildings being less polluting, but that because of the huge amount of floor space being added all around the world, that in fact it was just overwhelming any improvements. But I wonder whether this whole COVID-19, the digitalization that's come through very rapidly now, and also increasing numbers of people, say, working from home rather than in the office, that buildings may achieve what I think you've been saying in the Exponential roadmap, more usage and less waste. And then, of course, it raises the question, what do we do with the buildings we don't need anymore? Which is another matter. But
turn them into residential buildings. Instead of erecting new ones.
And maybe, maybe we don't need so incredibly much cement the next 10 years because we still don't have fossil-free cement. Okay. So there are maybe some things that we need to stop pushing out. We don't need to cement the whole planet, basically. So maybe we need to cut it back before we have the fossil-free cement, just as an example. Can we use the buildings much more efficiently? That should be the starting point as far as I see.
It's possible,
Yes, or we will make the green cement.
Of course we should do that.
The cheaper alternative, and the bad cement, the expensive alternative. And we have a market economy that will adapt. It will take some years to scale up the new green cement. But if you change the rules, we will have that market within 10 years, absolutely. And we will have a situation where we need to build less while we are transitioning to this new phase, scaling up the green cement. And it will be a race to be the winner in the building industry, like we see now that has started in the steel industry. So I would say building industry is lagging. Steel industry is a little better, still lagging. Car industry, now we're talking. So just speed up the change.
But
and as long as long as this is going on, we could stand here on this stage and blah blah blah. It will still not move fast enough. So we need every solutions out there. But as long as this number is increasing, not decreasing, we will fail.
Because now we don't have a level playing field. We don't. It's not a level playing field.
That makes the bad cement, the bad steel,
the most attractive.
Exactly.
Of course.
It's not really a market economy, is it? When you're subsidizing to these kinds of numbers.
So what we show here on the shows we're broadcasting is that we have all the solutions. We have all the alternatives. But they are not scaling because it's unfair.
So actually, it's not even about the market economy. I mean, one thinks about the oil industry, it's not exactly a startup, is it? The oil industry is not really a startup.
No.
It's been around for a long time.
It's a dinosaur.
It's a dinosaur. It shouldn't need subsidies. Where there are some more exciting things that could save our planet and our whole way of life that actually need a bit of support in the beginning, like Renewables did in the beginning.
Maybe
Right.
oil needed those back in the 80s or something like that. But we don't need those money going into the dinosaurs today.
Yeah, and some of this is very political, isn't it? It's like governments buying favors from people that are not very rich. Will give you
But
subsidized fuel.
that's not, if you look into the facts about subsidies, it's not going to the poor people.
Right.
It's going to the oil billionaires.
Right.
Look into the facts.
Okay.
It's not giving money to the poor people.
Right.
That's not where those money are going.
Yeah.
It's in the opposite direction.
And the rich people, if they get subsidized petrol, why would you subsidize the fuel of people who are wealthy, right? They don't need to have their fuel subsidized, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And I think
Put that closer to your mouth there, Johan.
Yeah, the shift from us people is incredibly important. So all the people here at UN or this show, I mean, they should, of course, do what they can in terms of halving their emissions. I really hope they're doing that, because if you sort of don't doing your best, it's basically impossible, as far as I think, to drive the climate agenda. It's hypocrisy, as far as I see.
It's like I said earlier this show, you have to live the change.
Exactly.
Not to show others for show, but in order to understand what's needed to be done, in order to understand that this is absurd. You're trying to halve your emission, but the money goes into the other direction. It's much more expensive to go ahead by train, like we all have done here on stage.
Yes.
It's much harder to book the ticket. It takes a week to figure out how to go here, and when we go here, everything breaks down because we have no international system talking with railways together. If you don't have this understanding, you don't have a clue what's needed to be done. And what I'm so frustrated of is kind of political people like, oh, our climate agenda is to build a charging station for my new electric car. Come on, it's a little bit more than that needed.
Absolutely. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about how we're going to finance it all.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So we have another broadcast tomorrow. So stay tuned. Every day we have broadcasts, and the theme tomorrow is finance. So I'd like to direct a thank you to all of you that have watched this broadcast today, and of course to the speakers, including you, Johan Falk, from Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and Ingmar Rentzhog making it all possible, of course. So
It's not.
Well, it's teamwork.
Yeah.
It's teamwork for sure. There's lots of people behind the scenes and in front of us here, stage managers, etc., working hard to make this happen.
Can I just say something?
Yes, please.
I want to say a big thank to all my colleagues and partners. We have been working. We have been sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours, no pause, whatever, since we left Stockholm from the train ride on Friday. We've been working 24/7, and also the hubs in Washington, Nairobi, Stockholm, and everyone here in the tech team. It's really challenging to broadcast from the COP, from the floor, because you need to improvise a lot. And I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to work with so many dedicated people. And I will like to give an advice to other business leaders, and that is, if your company have a purpose, you never have problem to recruit, find amazing people that will do everything they can in order to make your company succeed. It's huge difference with any company I've been running before this on the people behind it, because we have a purpose, and purpose is profitable. It must be profitable.
Thank you. Well put, Ingmar.
Can I just say that?
Yes, please.
When Ingmar was making his very important points, another $9 million was spent on subsidizing fossil fuels. It's quite fascinating. I can't take my eye off the clock.
No.
Yeah.
It's depressing and urgent at the same time, and we just have to keep our eyes on this, so this is eventually put to a stop.
Yeah.
So now we end this broadcast to a stop, and we do this by airing a beautiful video. It's called We Are Ocean, and it's a poetry initiative that has invited children to transform into oceanic beings. So with this, we say good night and goodbye and see you tomorrow.
Je suis un énorme requin bleu. J'habite dans l'eau avec mes amis les requins. On aime manger et avec nos ailerons, on se débarrasse des plastiques. Je suis un poisson clown et je mange des poissons. Je vis tout au fond de la mer. Je suis un crocodile requin. Je vis dans l'océan. Je mange des requins et des crocodiles. Je prends les déchets dans la bouche et je les mets dans un endroit pour pas qu'ils polluent la mer. Et je vis dans les profondeurs et je me fais souvent attaquer par le calamar vampire. Je suis un requin cochon. Je mange des requins de mer. Je prends les déchets et je les amène à la surface pour les mettre dans la poubelle. Et je vis avec des requins bleus. C'est Rolfsdotter-Jansson. C'est un poisson qui vit dans les fonds marins. Il fait du rock pour endormir ses proies et les manger. Décale-toi. Je suis un phoque et j'habite sur la banquise. Avec mes amis, on aime bien jouer au ballon. Bonjour, je m'appelle Super Bigorneau. Et je suis là pour sauver le monde et surtout sauver la planète. Je suis zéro déchet. Je me déplace toujours en super-héros. Youpi, youpi, youhou. Avec ma super cape. Zéro déchet. Bonjour, je suis super requin chapeau. Bonjour, je suis requin multicolore. Je suis le roi des requins tigres. Salut, moi je suis super méchante pieuvre. Et je suis là pour semer le chaos partout. J'aimerais bien me venger contre les humains. Je suis super requin, le roi des requins. Enfin, à moitié. Je me déplace comme ça. Un super requin. Coucou, je m'appelle Super Baleine. Je nage comme ça. Bonjour, moi c'est le dauphin. Alors moi je suis le cheval de mer à pois. Bonjour, moi je suis un narval. Bonjour, moi c'est le requin abyssal. Je vis dans les abysses comme indique mon nom et je me nourris de tout, sauf des déchets. Vous voulez connaître ma famille ? Eh bien je vais les manger. Je me déplace en sautant. Bonjour petite humaine, je vais te raconter une histoire pour que tu arrêtes de polluer la mer. Ok. Il y a 200 ans, des baleines vivaient en harmonie. Mais un jour, des humains ont commencé à jeter des déchets dans la mer. Et les baleines ont cru que c'était du plancton et elles ont commencé à manger les déchets et maintenant elles sont mortes à cause de vous. Elles sont mortes à cause de vous. Oh, je comprends que nous polluons la mer. Le poisson-chat. Bonjour, est-ce que vous pouvez cesser la pollution ? Mon amie la tortue est morte à cause d'un sac plastique. Elle a pris le sac plastique pour une méduse. Et on en a tous marre des éoliennes. Mon ami le dauphin est mort à cause d'une éolienne. Et vos bateaux polluent notre océan, le pétrole, l'huile, etc. On en a marre de tout ça. Donc arrêtez. Oh bonjour, on s'est déjà vu ? Tu t'appelles Sacha ? Tu es là et j'en profite. Vous polluez notre habitat. Vous salissez notre maison et vous faites trop de bruit. Faites un effort et au revoir. Salut tout le monde. Moi, je suis le super poisson-chat licorne. Et mon pouvoir, c'est de rappeler la joie et la bonne humeur dans tout l'océan.